Oh, yeah?
Here comes Helen. Hey, Helen.
Hi.
Hey.
Well, it's hard.
You didn't miss it.
I didn't?
No, we're just trying to figure out audio video stuff, so you're good.
Oh, okay.
Thing is when someone's a pink
That
dog.
panic.
I know. Your haircut is cute.
Oh, thank
like
you.
it.
Thanks. I'm just going to go get my pen.
Yes.
Hey, Connie, could you just get me a pad?
Oh, yeah.
Terry, on mine, there was an original plug-in that was needed.
For the sound?
Yeah, same thing for all the videos. So I have yours from your original,
Yeah,
and
there's no plug?
no, there's a special like Mac plug. This was
Oh, this is a
Windows
Mac.
Media,
Yeah.
and these are Macs,
Oh, Jesus.
so they don't have that
Okay,
program. But now you know.
now I know.
No. It's through Windows Media, and this doesn't have an issue.
Oops.
Yes. Oh, my bad. What? You said no, wait a minute, and I just broke the rule. Oh, no, there was another sound.
Okay. Ellen, why don't you treat
Yes.
Treat this very really. All right. Treat it well. All right. Oh. So everyone, let's take a nice deep breath in. Oh, let's just let go of all of the technology and let's just be centered in truth, centered in God, centered in love. No matter what you call it, it is just one thing. And we are it. And I know that tonight is unfolding perfectly. And I am blessing this night and each other and Terry and Mariana, who will be presenting to us tonight, knowing that it will be a night of divine download of information on Christianity and history of new thought, and that we are going to walk out of here with our heads just full of so much knowledge, knowing that we already know everything that we need to know. So let's just let it all go and be open. Be open to learn something tonight, something new. And support and love each other. And so I just am so grateful for this class, so grateful for Reverend James, so grateful for everything that we've learned so far. And so with that, I just release my words so that we can begin this beautiful, wonderful night together. And together we all say,
And so it is.
So, let's just take, would you take that slideshow off for a minute so that I can talk to you? So, last week, Sharon, great slides. I loved your slide for Islam. There were a lot of technical difficulties last week, obviously. There is this week. You have to be careful not to, when you have technical difficulties, when something happens, when things aren't going the way they're supposed to go, and this happens sometimes, you know, where it takes you, it's like you're late, you're going, don't let it affect you. Because there was so much going on last week that when you started your thing, you were a little bit of a daze. You were in a little bit of a, you know, okay? You have to literally take a second and blow it all away. Same thing for you tonight, okay? These are just my notes, which are great. Your material was terrific, very informative, very well researched. I really, really enjoyed it a lot. One thing you did though was that there were questions. There were a lot of questions, and there was dissension in the room. I'm looking right at you. It wasn't you that. Part of it was one question, probably was, but there was dissension in the room. Well, some of it was you. So and while you did answer their questions, you kind of let them talk to themselves. At one point, you were looking at something. They were all talking to each other and trying to figure something out, and you just moved right on. So and it was these two, I think, or it was
Yeah.
you and someone. But however they answered it was actually not right based on what you had just said. So, and they were trying to make sense out of it for themselves. They didn't get to the right place, and you moved on.
Somehow, probably.
Here's the thing, you have to be aware. If someone in your class starts talking, stop and listen. Say, okay, what's what? And be a part of it. You can't move
remember
on.
what it was about.
I don't. But there were a lot of questions, yeah. And you two were right by this mic. And what you didn't know was her mic was off. So everything was coming through here, so it sounded like you two were teaching the class. Yeah. So, yes, Marielle.
Oh, that was the question I was going to ask. So when somebody is doing side talking, you just stop. And
You
then-
can't keep teaching if someone's talking. You can't. They're not listening. And probably they're listening to them because that was fascinating what you two were talking about.
Because even
Whatever it
online,
was.
because even from online,
I watched it from online.
right, me too.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to hear what they were saying.
She went on, but I wanted to hear how they were resolving
Right,
it.
right, right.
So, but I heard more of them than her because she wasn't on her mic.
Because it took me off of paying attention.
Well, that's right. You were online last week.
Yes.
That's right.
And so I was.
Because they were louder because they were focused.
Yes.
Well, there was a distraction too, and the energy was taken off of you, Sharon. And then I was trying to.
And let's face it, in the new world, this is the red zone. It's not going to just be you get to talk to.
And then I was a little off because David, we couldn't get it projected from my computer, which we did last time. I don't know what happened this time. So I was trying to do two. I was trying to advance both of them because I couldn't see my notes on his. So I was trying to do this.
I enjoyed listening to the voices. I prayed when you did the thing you did. However, you have a habit of something that is going a million times. And if you're watching online and you don't have the benefit of your presence, it's maddening. Because every other sentence, and you start your sentences with them. You start your sentences and then you make a brilliant sentence, and then you finish your sentence and you go,
I know, and I was
go back and watch it.
trying to really be aware of it, but then I noticed I went to Starbucks and they said, what kind of coffee?
And you said,
I said, I heard myself saying it, isn't it like when I'm making a presentation, I must be doing it all the time and I'm not aware of it.
Yeah.
What
You're
was
laughing
that
at-
about Starbucks? What?
What?
There was this really horrific sound all of a sudden. I couldn't figure out what it was.
Is it Sharon saying,
What does that look like?
Oh, because you're hearing him. Terry, you know your mic is on. What are you just doing?
I'll never tell.
They all know.
That's what you guys were laughing at, right? Somebody that's-
Was that Leslie Nielsen
Yes.
movie? That,
Okay.
Yeah, we heard it all.
I'm wondering why you
We'll
were
all hear it later. 'Cause it's- Okay, going on.
So I won't be upset about it at all. I'll be calm and cool.
Be careful of saying Christ when you mean Jesus. Christ is not a person. Christ is a consciousness. Jesus is the person. So when you say Christ and you mean Jesus, it doesn't work. Okay, you were comparing Christ to Muhammad. Okay, so be careful about that. And a very good wrap up. Here's what's interesting. You reminded me of my show last week when I got to the last monologue and I was like, got this one. You know? Because all of a sudden you had a little bit more energy, you're like, and you're wrapping up. It was like, but again, just to look on the positive side, really great material. You just have some things you have to work on in terms of presentation.
I really am gonna have to be more aware of saying I must say it all the time and I'm just not aware of it.
Although,
Probably.
may I say that you did get better with the ums as the presentation went on, is what
I will not
noticed.
agree with her on that. She just, I think, got used to them. I didn't.
You don't think they
Watch it.
listened throughout?
No, watch it and you'll see. It's only an hour. Watch it. Just, yeah.
I'll do that.
Okay, Kiara Mitchell. Right.
Yes.
That was really great. Really, really terrific. I mean, I can't really critique you much because you'd have to bring the seat in for me to critique you. But you did a beautiful, beautiful job. You're a great host, which I love that. But I knew that. Every Sunday you do that. But the questions were great. I enjoyed everything I heard from him. Didn't you all love, if you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
The only thing I will say about the Sikh part of this was, and you actually corrected some of it, I think a lot of it was coming from his own personal view of it, as opposed to perhaps, although he got very historical, he did tell us some, because I found myself when I was watching it, going online and looking up what he was saying to verify it. So I didn't have a sense that he did not present me. It wasn't like I was listening to Swami Satchidananda or someone that when he started talking, I immediately went to a place of, okay, so I'm going to get like a street version of Sikhism. An American who became a Sikh. I was more interested in whatever made you become a Sikh if you were an American. But I really did enjoy all of that. But I think there were some of the Sikh traditions we missed based on his awareness of it. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
He did a good job in trying to bring some of it back. And I really appreciated you comparing it to Science of Mind. Taking those two. And it was interesting how much that one did work.
Similar.
I was ready to become a Sikh.
I know, right? Get my turban. I'm ready.
Do my hair or a turban.
If it wasn't for the cold showers and the waking up really, really early.
Cold showers.
He talked about it in a way that made it sound enlightening.
Actually, you know what? I actually thought to myself, I may try a cold shower.
I may try it.
Skin more vibrant.
I literally went, I'm going to try that. And I tried it the next morning. It was horrific.
Oh, see?
That's long enough. So that the
I
blood.
knew it.
Okay.
I went to him last week for a treatment, and the man is amazing on the table, and he muscle tests you with your legs and feet and all kinds of things, and he hit certain things, and he was absolutely on.
Good.
From a psychological standpoint.
Great job, and I more than anything, I applauded the uniqueness of it.
Thanks. I wanted to be different, and
Different.
I researched and I did all my research so that I could form the questions, and then so that I knew the answers to I wasn't really asking because I didn't know. I knew the answers, but I tried to guide him to the answers. So
yes, and that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you're a great host. You actually led him down, but he threw in some curves.
He did.
Okay, number 8. Terry, you ready?
Yes, sir. No nervousness, no previous experiences.
Terry, it's God doing the presentation.
Yes, she is.
Terry, on your head.
Rays of love.
Yes. Ladies, I'm sitting at the.
Did you have a clicker for me to?
She's doing it. Just point to her. All you gotta do is point to her.
And I'll adjust it.
Just like you would do a clicker, she'll do it. As opposed to next slide, please. It's okay. All he's gonna do is point to you.
I'm gonna nod my head.
No, because you're not doing your talk.
Okay.
Point your finger.
Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Then you got to click it again every time. There you go. So we're going to have a brief history of Christianity and Catholicism. As you see there, there's a picture of Jesus Christ, of St. Peter, of Martin Luther, and then Jesus again. Basically, we're going to be talking about oops. Okay. We're going to be talking about, I can't do this, is not going to work. It's so small. Catholicism Catholicism is a Christian religion. Some people don't think it is, but it truly is from all my research. We're talking about Adam and Eve. Of course, along with that is original sin. Talking about first pope being Peter. the sacraments, the prayers of Catholicism, their rituals, and the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is often missed, the rules of the church. They've got a lot of rules. And then we'll get into Christianity, Martin Luther, of course, Henry VIII, and then we'll get into Jesus as a personal savior and what it takes to get into heaven from a Christian perspective, and the similarities of Christianity and science of mind. Okay. It's very interesting. There are 1.25 million Muslims in the country, or in the world, and by the year 2070, there'll be more Muslims than any other religion in the world. That's amazing to me. There's 2.8 billion Christians, 1.25 million Catholics, but in 1910, there was only 291 million, and now there's a 1.25 billion, so it's grown great.
Sorry, 1.25. I don't know what you're talking about.
The Catholics in 1910, there were 291 million Catholics. Now there's 1.25 billion. So it's been a tremendous growth. Of course, some of that has to go along with the fact that the universe has grown exponentially since then as well. There's 32% of the world population is Christians. So a third of the world's populations are Christians. Okay. The Garden of Eden. And we talk about the Garden of Eden, where it all started. Catholics and Christians, because this is not going to work. Excuse me. I'm going to go to trying to do it on the laptop.
Jerry, what if you got rid of all of those and just follow the slides and talk? Just get away from
I got so much material here.
No, but let's just see how much you know. Because I don't think you're going to make it through reading all these notes.
All right.
Just look at the board. What's on the board?
Okay. So it all started with the Garden of Eden.
No, get away from there. Get away from there.
I'm dependent on it, so I don't know that I can do it. Catholics believe that unless you are baptized and original sin is taken away from you, because everyone is born with quote-unquote original sin, which amazes me, because how could a baby, an infant, something just coming into this universe have original sin? And if that child dies, he's not going to go to heaven, he's not going to go to hell, she'll go to limbo, which is a place between heaven and hell, which is absolutely impossible for me to fathom. Yet, as a child, I believed all this stuff. It's so ingrained in me, and it's very interesting about doing this. Yes, ma'am.
Does in regards to the concept of original sin, is that in the story of Garden of Eden, is in like Genesis where
No, the Catholics made that up.
Okay.
The Catholics made that up and said there was original sin.
Well, what does it have to do with that?
Because they were the ones that created the sin, quote unquote, and because of their sin, then there was an original sin placed on all of us. The whole universe carried that sin on and was responsible for that. Eden is a place of bliss. If you think about it, and all the stories we've seen and everything we've done, it's truly bliss. In science of mind, though, we have to realize that God is the source of our being. None of these things, material things or gardens or oceans or people or anything else, really have anything to do with it. It's all about God. And God is, clearly the source of our being. In science of mind, we talk about sin, of course, being missing the mark. But in Catholicism, the original sin is the worst thing you can do, and you have to be baptized. And the birth of Jesus is next.
Sorry, say that again. Okay, Catholicism. What's the worst sin you can do?
Well, you can't go to heaven if you are not baptized as a Catholic. Okay, you go to limbo. The birth of Jesus. We all know the story of Jesus' birth. it was very clear, and that's down at the bottom right-hand corner. It was in a manger. 3 wise men came, and there's stories about them bringing gifts. What I did is I took a picture of the inside of the Church of Nativity, which is in Jerusalem. There's 3 stars like that, and they say that is where Jesus was born. The Catholics have one, the Christians have another, and the Eastern Orthodox have another. They're all 3 right in a row, and they all say that's the thing that everybody gets down and kneels to and prays to. It's a beautiful thing, but how can there be 3? That's my question. I have a hard time with that. And then the bottom left-hand corner is a wall that's around Bethlehem. It's a huge wall, about 30 feet high, and it's all full of graffiti. Can you imagine Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, being full of graffiti? The area is owned by the Palestinians, and the Jews cannot go into Bethlehem. They're not allowed into Bethlehem. When I was there, I was with you. You're given a guide to take you through, and of course you pay him, and they take you through. And we were walking back, and we were talking, and he jumped back because we were getting to the gate to go out, and he said, "If they see me, they'll shoot me," because they're so angry, and there's no love there between the Jews and the Palestinians. Actually, the cabs have different licenses in the city of Jerusalem, whether they belong to the West Bank or the city of Jerusalem. December 25th, we know, is Jesus' birthday. That's really not true. It was the day that they picked because of winter solstice, and that was what the pagan holiday was. So they chose that as a day that they had made Christmas, and they backed it up 3 months to the spring equinox was when Jesus was conceived. So they decided that Christmas was the day that Jesus was born, even though the solstice is on the 21st of December, not the 25th. But they all make up this stuff and do what they do. So I did all that. So let's talk about the next one. Jesus' first teachings was very interesting. As you know, when he was a young man, 12 years old, it was Passover, and he was going into Jerusalem, and he got lost. And his mother and father couldn't find him for 3 days. And he was found in the temple teaching the doctors. And his mother said, "Why did you do this to you, little boy? And you ran away and were scared to death. You were gone. We couldn't find you." He said, "Don't you know I was about my Father's work?" So he started teaching basically when he was 12 years old. And then the public ministry, now I had videos for all of this, where he did water into wine. You can't make it work, huh? Probably not. Yeah. Well, then the story that they ran out of wine, and Mary said, "Will you please get more wine?" He says, "I'm not ready for this," but he did it anyway because of his mother. And then there's another video of him walking on water. And basically the consciousness of being able to walk on water is when you believe you can walk on water, you can. It's all about faith and knowingness. Most people sink, of course, when they're on water. The other one was he saved the adulteress who they were throwing stones at. And as they threw the stones, he said, "Who among you is with no sin?" And he said that no one answered, and so he said to her, "Go without sin again, and you'll be fine." The reason for that, as I got from all of this in the Bible stories of all the things that he did as miracles, was to establish the credibility of who he was and what he wanted this church to be. He was really doing marketing in a form of creating miracles. Like we do healings, he was doing miracles. The next one is Trinity. No, the Holy. So in 365, there was a Nicene Creed, it was in Constantinople, and it started this was the first thing that the Catholic Church ever had as a group, and in that they decided that the Catholic Church was the only Catholic Apostolic Church. That was the only church that was out in the time, so that worked fine for them in those days, and it's still the same. They still believe it's the one only Catholic Apostolic Church. I remember as a young man, I was 10, 11 years old, I'm delivering my newspapers down the street on Magnolia, and I looked into a church because they were having a wedding the next day, and I wanted to see what it looked like because I'd never seen the inside of another church. And I was so guilty, I could not believe it because I knew I was going to go to hell because I looked in that church. It's so drummed into you as a Catholic, and I'm sure James will admit. How many of you, by the way, are raised Catholic? Beat up Catholic? Whatever. Just two of you? Okay, wow, interesting. Usually it's a lot more than that. Okay, let's go to the next one. They talk about the Holy Trinity, the Father, God, as we say, first cause, the Son of Jesus, be second cause, and then the Holy Ghost. We have the same thing, only we call it the triune nature of spirit, soul, and body. It is basically, we're basically saying that spirit is where we create where the ideas are created, and spirit knows nothing outside of itself and just produces. And it produces information into the seed, into the soul, which of course creates the effects that you want in the body. Next, the Rosary. The Rosary is something that everyone says in the Catholic Church over and over again. It starts out with the Apostles' Creed, goes into three, glory be to the Father, or an Our Father, glory be to the Father, and then three Hail Marys, a glory be to the Father, and then repeat that Hail Marys 10 times, and glory be to the Father, and the Apostles' Creed again. You were first.
So, is the Rosary the prayer or the beads itself?
You hold the beads, going from bead to bead, saying the prayer.
So the Rosary, the word Rosary actually is the prayer itself, not the...
You pray the Rosary. You pray the Rosary as an outreach to God, and there's a lot of symbolism around the Rosary.
What's the Apostles' Creed?
I'll get to that in a few minutes. It's the core of the Catholic Church.
Can I ask something, Terry?
Yes.
What does Hail Mary mean?
You're praying to Mary, Jesus' mother. Hail Mary, full of grace. I'll get to the three main prayers in a minute, and we'll go over them real quick.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the other thing with the Rosary, we were asked as children to meditate through each one of the five mysteries of the Rosary. The first one is the Annunciation. That's where God prepared Mary for her conception. The second one, you think about God going to see her cousin Elizabeth 40 miles away, who had just had a child, and she was in her elder years. But it was a way of her supporting her neighbor. The third mystery is the birth of Jesus through the Virgin Mary, and that is, of course, the primary whole enchilada. The fourth is a joyful mystery, is the law of Moses, and when they take Jesus to the temple again to present him to the Lord for the first time, and there is a price that you pay to the temple, and the poor people had a smaller amount that they had to pay, but basically that you get the purity of mind and body. And the fifth one. Okay.
I don't know where you went to. back to the. What's the whole enchilada?
The mystery of the nativity. How Jesus was born through the Virgin Mary, and you're supposed to meditate on that.
Is there a name for that?
It's called the mystery of the Nativity.
It's not the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah, it could be the Immaculate Conception, but you're supposed to be thinking and meditating on that event of Jesus' birth while you're saying the third set of 5 rosaries.
Is this we're in the rosary?
Yeah.
On the third set of, the third decade of
The third decade.
Of the,
Yes.
Hail Mary.
Yes. Third set of Hail Marys.
So you're saying you're supposed to say, so you have an Our Father, then you have 10 Hail Marys, then a Glory Be.
Yeah. And there's 5 of those.
Right.
Okay. And this is the third one.
And on the third one, you're supposed to do what?
Think about Jesus' birth, Immaculate Conception, Virgin Mary,
Where did this come from?
out of the Catholic. That's what all the research I did.
I never heard that. That was going to be a priest.
It's also set up like an intention.
And
Or you start out with the intention, and then that is actually what the 10 Hail Marys are about, is the intention for understanding more of the birth of Jesus and what that means in your life.
Is this a specific way to do it? Is this like a specific type of doing the rosary?
No, it's the way
you're supposed to do it.
old timers have done it.
ask your aunt if she doesn't do that in a novena.
She's my aunt that used to do rosaries as well.
Yeah, the same thing as in novenas. And then the 5th one is finding Jesus in the temple. And when he said, it's about obedience, that Jesus disobeyed his parents and went off, so you're supposed to be thinking about obedience. Go ahead. The next one is the Mass.
Excuse me, are you going to be also talking about the novenas?
Yeah. The next one is the Mass. The Mass is the Catholic's most important prayer. It's the ritual. It's the source of Catholic life. Like we have a Sunday service, they have Mass, and it gives people the strength to get through the week, basically. And it's honoring God and Jesus. And it's the most important part of the Mass, of course, is the Eucharist. The Eucharist is receiving Holy Communion, receiving the body and blood of Christ in a little wafer, and accepting that in you.
Is it the actual body and blood? Or is it
Well, they bless the body and blood at the altar, and in the wine and the bread, and they bless it, and that symbolizes the body and blood of Christ in the wafer. No, it's really not. It's the you believe it's the wafer is Jesus Christ.
It's transubstantiation, right?
It's called the miracle of transubstantiation.
Transubstantiation.
Right. And doesn't it also come from the Last Supper?
Yes, so part of that's what Christ did at the Last Supper. I'll get into that too. The Mass is said every day, not just on Sundays. Of course, up until the 1960s, the Mass was always said in Latin. As James and I were raised with Latin. I mean, I could still say half the Mass in Latin. Nomine Patris Filio Spiritus Sanctus, Confiteor Deo Omnipotens. I mean, it's so ingrained in you as an altar boy, as a child, that it's part of your being. It never leaves you, and it just amazes me. Now the Mass is said in the language of each country. It was the Vatican II had a lot of changes in the Catholic Church. The biggest one, of course, was the Mass. Then the fact that there was no more, you didn't have to not eat meat on Friday. Now you only have to not eat meat on Friday during Lent. So there's a lot of things that came out of that. It took several years for them to get through all that, and there was a lot of things that came out of it. Sir?
Can you explain what the Vatican II was?
It was a group of the cardinals that got together for a couple years off and on and changed the rules and made the Catholic Church more palatable to the laity, because they wanted to get more people in, and they felt that they were being too strict with people and that kind of thing.
I don't know if you already said it, but I'm a little bit lost because I know nothing about
Okay.
this, and so I'm wondering, how did the Catholic Church come about versus Christianity?
Catholic Church was the first church. Jesus said to Peter, his apostle, "On this rock I will build my church. You will build my church." And Peter's name means rock. And that was the first church. Until the 11th century, that was the only church. Okay? There was no other Christianity. Christianity was, I'll get into, is an offshoot. All the Christian churches are an offshoot of Catholicism. Yeah. So it was the first. Okay, let's go to the prayers. The Apostles' Creed. I'm going to say this one. I'm not going to say the rest of it. I'm going to say this one, though. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus. Now, this is the reason I'm doing this is because this is the crux of the church. This is what the church stands for. This is what the church, everybody believes. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit. Notice he was conceived by the Holy Spirit, not by intercourse as everybody else. Born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. The third day he rose again from the dead, ascended into heaven, and sits at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From thence he will come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the holy Christian church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, and the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting.
Are you saying this is the Apostles' Creed from the Catholic Church?
Yes.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not the original.
This is from the Christian Church, because the Catholic Church does not say he descended into hell.
Right.
And they
Okay.
also say the Holy Catholic Church.
The Holy Catholic Church, not the Christian Church.
Okay.
So this is what the Christians have adopted.
Right.
Although the Episcopalians say they speak exactly the way Catholic.
The Apostles' Creed, as I taught it, did say he descended. Really? Yes.
Well, yeah.
As I was taught, it did say that, and they gave us an explanation of that.
There's so many versions of it, and I hadn't said it in years, so I just picked it. I thought it was all Catholic. My mistake. Let's go to the Hail Mary. Now your explanation for the Hail Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. And that's the most said prayer in the Catholic Church. And notice it how you're talking to Mary to pray for us sins, and because she's close to God. You don't pray to God. You pray to a saint or to Mary. The next one I'm going to do a little differently. As you can see, Our Father who art in heaven, in metaphysics means God is the consciousness that we are when attained. It is heaven on earth. In other words, Our Father who art in heaven, heaven is on earth. Thy kingdom come, hallowed be his name. Holy is the name, the power, and the word. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, means the kingdom of the realm of consciousness, and the will is aligned with truth.
Question there, Terry. Is that a typo that you put in? You said thy kingdom come, on there it says they will be done.
Yeah, that should be thy will be done.
Thy will be done.
Yes, definitely. Well, you remember, don't you? The kingdom it'll say this again, the kingdom is the realm of consciousness, and the will is the alignment with truth. Give us this day our daily bread. There is never any duality. Forgiveness is remainder of us mistakes and made made that we all make them, and this is the way of moving through them. God provides nourishment for our souls. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. So basically, it's the metaphysical saying of that is a little bit different.
Once again, Terry, is that part where you said forgiveness?
Yeah, that shouldn't be there either.
Yeah,
that should not be there. That's
forgive us.
That's the Christian interpretation. I missed that too. Not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Okay, does that clear up the questions, Helen? Helen?
Yes, for the Hail Mary, yes, it does.
Yes,
Thank you.
Now let's go to the
Can
second.
I ask one question though?
Sure.
Why pray to saints versus just praying directly to God?
Because Catholics are not good enough to pray to God. We are not good enough as a Catholic. We're not God as we know God to be. You walk into a Catholic church and say, I want to pray to God, they throw you out. If you walk into a Catholic church and say, you are God, that would be amazing. There would be no end to that.
Is this your opinion, or is it the doctrine?
Well, clearly.
The parts of the Mass are prayers to God, right?
Yeah, parts of it.
I mean, that's the part of the Mass itself is.
The Lord's Prayer is a direct prayer to God. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
That was when Jesus came to his apostles.
Right.
But as
I mean, I've never heard that you can't pray to God. You can thrown out if you ask to pray to God. And I think the Mass, when you celebrate the Mass, you are saying prayers.
Then why would you just pray to the saints or to Mary? Why is there so many statues and so many?
Well, maybe it's like I said about Islam, even though maybe the church doesn't say for sure that those saints can intercede for you, but still there's a feeling like they're closer, they're more holy, and if you pray to them, somehow it'll get to God quicker.
The best line of James's play was when he got on his knees and said, obviously Mary screwed it up, so I better do something different. And that was, but that's what you were taught to do. You pray to Mary. You pray to Mary, and then you pray to the saints. And you're right. You can pray to God. I guess I hadn't thought of it that way. I just always remembered as a kid. Who do you think you are to be able to pray to God? You need to pray to the saints or to Mary.
Well, also because we have priests. I mean, there are priests that intercede too. Right.
Yeah, there's lots of slants on it. Let's go to the next one. The sacraments. There are 7 sacraments. This is the rituals of the Catholic Church, which are very, very important. First one is baptism. It's the first step. It's when a baby is baptized and the parents make a commitment to raise that child as a Catholic, and it's an embrace with God. The second one is the Eucharist, receiving Holy Communion. It's Christ's body and blood, and as a child around 6 or 7 years old, you receive your first communion, and then you're able to take communion. You learn all about God, and you get deeper into catechism because you're a little older and you learn about it. And what happens is you're nourished spiritually by that host and brought closer to God. Confirmation is when one becomes a mature Christian, and the initiation most associated with the gift of the Holy Spirit and becoming an adult. Of course, penance is when you go to communion as a result are called, you ask for forgiveness of your sins, and then you can along with that you can forgive others. And then there's the holy confession, but penance, confession, yes. You can receive Holy Communion after confession. Okay.
Did I hear you say, Terry, and then you can forgive others?
Yes. The way they're writing it now, penance or confession gives you grace, and then you can go out and you can also allows you to forgive others in your life. Not as a priest. No. Yes, not as a priest forgiving, but as a, like we say, forgive everything. Then there's marriage. The whole purpose of it is create family and family values, as well as getting close again to God. Then the anointing of the sick. When you're making your transition, the priest comes in and blesses you and gives you grace, and as long as you don't commit a mortal sin, you will go to heaven. Holy orders is when a man becomes a priest and he is ordained and vows to help other Catholics receive the other sacraments and is there to assist them.
It's the same thing for becoming a nun, right? That would be for
Yes.
holy orders?
No, you don't have, it's not a sacrament. Becoming a nun is not a sacrament. Holy orders is a sacrament.
So
Becoming
it's just for the men?
Just for men, yes. Women, a sister or nun takes a vow, but it's not like, it is not a sacrament as holy orders is.
So it wouldn't even be under that category of holy order?
No, not at all. Interesting. Then we have the rules. That's the fun stuff. Basically, they say that sex is not a right in a union, but a privilege. No, where are we? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the Ten Commandments. Well, I don't want to go through those. You all know what they are. We studied those forever. Basically, the Catholic Church believes in the Ten Commandments, and if you do certain things there, you're committing a mortal sin, and you'll go to hell. And I'll get into that in a few minutes. Go to the next one, please. Okay. Conception outside of normal intercourse is considered immoral. In other words, if you use artificial insemination or anything like that, it is considered a sin. Homosexuals are absolutely, that's it. You can't be in the church, but they're doing that a lot more now. However, the beautiful thing, and we'll get into the Pope in a minute too, Pope Francis, when he was here last year, said, "Who am I to judge?" That was just so huge that a Pope in this day and age would say that, and it's just an amazing experience how far we have come in the Catholic Church has come in being able to say that it's okay to be homosexual. Who is he? Well, he didn't say it was okay to be homosexual, but he said, "Who am I to judge?"
Does it actually say this stuff's in doctrine? In doctrine, or is it just
Yeah.
It's part of the rules of the church. In order to be, you cannot. Most churches, not all, but most churches will not allow you into church and receive Holy Communion if you're homosexual.
I think they will, as long as you're not practicing, as long as you're not having sex.
Yeah, well, that's true, as long as you're not having sex. Yeah.
But you can still be homosexual.
Okay, yeah, technically you're right. But who doesn't have sex? If you're with a partner.
Yeah, I know people that have actually given up having sex with each other to go back to the church.
Okay, that's interesting. I never.
That was the beginning and the end of the relationship too.
Well,
Also, like the Jesuit orders. I have two friends in Phoenix who are part of the Jesuit Catholic Church, and they're totally fine. They're allowed to be there. They're married, all of it, and they're allowed to be there.
Yeah. Every diocese and every cardinal changes the rules a little bit, I guess. It's a big world out there, and things are changing.
The rules are not the Bible. They're Rome made them.
Rome, it's all done from the Vatican.
So can I ask something, Terry?
Sure.
How long ago were these rules made up? Like the Vatican just one day decided to make these rules?
This was at the Nicene in 380, whatever it was, and also Vatican II. That's where they sat for a couple of years and made up rules and changed them and talked about them and bantered them back and forth.
So this is like it's like an evolution of Catholicism.
Right.
It's not, because it didn't start out this way, is what I'm saying. Or did it?
No, it didn't start out this way. Well, if you go to the Bible, there's things in the Bible that they're taking their interpretation of and saying these are our rules because.
Okay.
So you cannot take your own life if you're in miserable pain and you're dying, and you're in pain. You cannot take your own life. You can't go to Oregon and use their laws to take your own life. That's against the law. You won't go to heaven. Yes, ma'am.
So do you have any idea why things that are fuzzier in the Bible versus explicit things like do not eat pork, they're unclean, do not mix two fabrics, all the things that are like an abomination and put to death. Do you have any idea why fuzzy things remained the rule of the day as opposed to the stuff that was explicitly said?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, but explicitly said as to whose perception. Whose perception? But who? How many Bibles are there? There's so many different forms of the Bible. Well, there's the Catholic Bible. There's the St. James version. There's all kinds of Bibles that are all different.
So does the Catholic one say anything about shellfish and pig and pork?
I don't know.
Yes, it does. It's got it. Yes.
I think most of the Old Testament is very similar. But Terry, isn't it true that when you're talking about rules, that some of the rules are considered rules of the church and some are considered rules of God?
Right.
And so that when they have these big meetings,
that's
they
right.
can only change the rules of the church and not necessarily the rules of God, which is, I think, why the Pope doesn't want to have abortion or anything like that.
Right. They can't change the fact that there's abortion because that's clearly a rule of the church. There's a newspaper called The Tidings, used to be anyway, and every week it would come out and tell you what movies you could see. There's certain movies you could not see. You're not allowed to see them.
They had a list. Oh yeah, they had a list of books and movies.
Right.
They had a Catholic review board that would look at movies, and if it didn't meet the board standards, if you went to the movie, you would commit a moral sin.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Was there one more that you wanted to?
Did I miss one?
Adoption, is that?
Well, adoption is yes. The only thing that they allow as far as having a child that's not yours is through adoption. They say there's hundreds of thousands of children in the world that don't have homes, and if you cannot have a child, don't use artificial insemination. Use God's given child who is on the earth already. Okay. Then, of course, abortion is against the rules. Contraception is against the rules. And the interesting thing, until the 30s, most Christian religions did not allow contraception either. And that's just recently changed, well, in the last 85, 90 years. Next one. Now, there's sin. There's the 7 deadly sins: envy, wrath, greed, sloth, pride, and lust. I don't want to get into all that. It's not, you know.
Was it specific to Catholicism?
Yes. Catholicism. No?
It started with Catholicism, but it's included in almost all of Christianity.
Is it? And then there's mortal and venial sin. A mortal sin is not going to Mass on Sunday. You'll go to hell if you miss a Mass on Sunday. So if James wants us to come on a regular basis, he needs to put a rule in like that.
I'm seeing one of those movies that's
Wait, what's the other? Mortal sin and what?
Venial sin.
A mortal sin and
I thought a venial sin was when you used to go to church. I mean,
What is venial sin?
venial sin is a minor infraction. It's a lie. It's, you know, something that's I stole a pack of gum or something like that. Something you had an evil thought. You know, even if you think about sex, when you look at someone and have a thought, that's a venial sin. Any minor infraction. Mortal sins are basically not going to Mass on Sunday, murder, of course, several others of the big ones. Some of the deadly sins
What
are.
about adultery?
Yeah, that would be a mortal sin, of course. Yeah. Fortification would be a mortal sin. Okay.
Sorry, what kind of cation?
Fortification.
Fornication?
Fornication.
Oh, okay.
I said it wrong.
Isn't that just regular sex? I don't.
Yeah, regular sex if you're not married.
Okay.
That's a
Oh,
mortal.
Okay.
That's a mortal sin.
You're not old enough to remember.
I'll get good to this. They say mortal sin destroys the grace of God in the sinner. Now, confession to a priest is the only way to take that off your soul. So you go in and you say, I committed a mortal sin. I didn't go to Mass on Sunday, or I had sex outside of marriage, or whatever it was. I murdered somebody. The priest will absolve you. He'll give you probably 3 Hail Marys and 3 Our Fathers, and it's all over. That's the crux of it. Okay. Yeah, that's it's all the same. That's basically what you get. So the interesting thing but however, the priest cannot disclose that, even if he's subpoenaed by the courts. And what's always amazed me, James, is why do we as practitioners, or you as a minister, have to, when there's something that's like that, you have to disclose it, or we have to disclose it. If someone commits murder or abuses a child or does something that's over the line, we have to report it. Yeah, but why is a priest not?
That's changing now too.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Because of how the priests.
There was such a revered code of silence between priest and congregant that they were not subject to.
Right.
A priest can be prosecuted now for not full.
Really?
Well, according to the church, though, according to the church, you still can.
According to the church, they
Yeah,
can.
the priest would have to go to jail.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And be willing to go to jail.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is about the 3 Hail Marys and 3 Our Fathers. We believe in cause and effect, of course. And if you really believe in cause and effect, the outcome of what happens to you in your life because of the sin that you did, quote unquote, or when you missed the mark, you get to learn a very deep lesson. And if you're smart, that lesson is going to change the way you do things in the future. You're not going to commit that sin again or miss the mark again. It's not for sure, but most of the time you're going to think a long time before you do that again. Okay, that basically is what we talked about last night in class about with Troward is this the sin with cause and effect has a much greater impact on you than going to confession, because confession makes it very easy. But you see, with Catholics, you live in total guilt all the time. It's absolutely amazing, the guilt that you live in for everything, every little thing that you do. To go to the next one, original sin. Of course, we've already talked about that. It's basically when you are in. I wanted to cover all the sins here. When you are born and you are born into original sin because of what Adam and Eve did in the Garden of Eden, and every child has that thumbprint put on them. Next is the Stations of the Cross. I'm not going to go all through those. Basically, guilt. I'm sorry. They wear guilt like shackles. It's just amazing. Next, Lent. We're in Lent right now. It started yesterday. Okay, and the idea of Lent is 40 days before Easter to prepare for Jesus's crucifixion, death, resurrection, and ascension into heaven. And they ask you to sacrifice, to give up something for Lent. Coffee, cigarettes, sex, whatever. And my belief, and what I've really come to believe with Science of Mind is, when I was consulting and raising money, I always said to people, if you have to sacrifice to give money to the church, don't. It's not supposed to be. It's not a sacrifice. It's a gift of love. And I don't have to sacrifice and give up something to get close to God. And if I believe that, it makes my life so much easier. So there's no need to sacrifice. And if God is a God of love, which God is, why would God want us to sacrifice and do without something? Okay? It just doesn't make any sense, but that's what they do. The next, now,
You know what the theory is about getting the ashes for Ash Wednesday?
no, I don't.
Well, one of the things they do is they actually, I'm not sure they know this, but they actually take the ashes and with the sign of the cross, they put it on your third
Forehead.
chakra, which actually in the history of the chakras is your will. So what they're doing actually is activating your willpower to be able then to walk without eating chocolate or cigarettes or beer or whatever it may be for those 40 days. And so part of the theory also is that ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And so it's a symbolism of the strength and the courage that God bore the cross and sacrificed his life for us.
Terry, do you know where the ashes come from each year?
No.
Very on.
They come from palm that is burnt on Palm Sunday because
From the previous year.
from the previous year, yes, they're not allowed on Palm Sunday. You receive the palm, which the symbolism is that when Jesus came in on the donkey on Palm Sunday, they were honoring him with fans of palm. So then on Palm Sunday, you get palm. And you're never supposed to throw it away. The only way that you can let go of it is by burning it. So that's
Those are the ashes they use. In fact, when I was a minister on the Caribbean cruises on Holland America, every Ash Wednesday, I was on the ship, which I would be on the ship this week, actually. And I had to do the Ash Wednesday service. And we had to literally dock in some city, some Caribbean place where they had palms. And every Ash Wednesday, the ship had to dock to get the palms just for like an hour. And then the ashes would come in.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, the next is, click it. Like, did we do the Stations of the Cross? No, I kind of skipped over that, and I'm not going to go into that because the Stations of the Cross are 14, I guess, statues, pictures, symbols in the church of Jesus's way to get to the crucifixion. Okay, from the time he started all the way through to carrying the cross all the way through the streets and the palms and all the.
Are these just pictures that are in churches, or do people do things with them?
People pray to each one of those when they walk through they say the Stations of the Cross, and they pray to those symbols on the wall.
Is it like a hero's journey type of?
Kind of, yes, yeah.
Do they do this every Sunday?
No. What they do it at Easter time. Usually Holy Week, the week before Easter was when most of when it's all done actually.
Is there like a special day where they're like Station of the Cross Day?
Good Friday, Good Friday, the Friday before Easter.
Well, do you know that the intention behind novenas? Do you know what novenas are?
Yeah, I've got. We're getting to novenas. Okay, this is
because that's an important part of the Stations of the Cross is a novena, which is sort of like a ritual.
Okay. The next one.
Just know that the stations are significant.
Yeah.
If you're interested, it's worth looking into. If you really want to know, they're very significant in regards to.
It's all part of the Bible. This is a video I did on the Bible, and while I all know you love and adore the man who's in this video, which you can't see, and obviously God has a great reason for not showing it. It happens to be Donald Trump with a Bible in his hand, and the reason I did that is to show you how powerful the Bible is. He has this Bible that his mother gave him, and she wrote a note, signed it for him. And it just shows how powerful the Bible is in this country, that he would use that as a marketing ploy to get with the what's the word I'm trying to think? Easy for you to say.
How people swear on the Bible. In some parts of the country, their courts are allowing them to swear on the Quran.
Really?
Should be something that they feel something about.
I
Yeah.
swear on the Bible and not give my crap about it.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll swear on this.
Okay, next. There are half a dozen holy days of obligation. Who's that? Oh, okay. Well, you can see them there. There's a half a dozen holy days of obligation. You have to go to Mass on those days. Sunday is the day of resurrection. Ascension, 40 days after the resurrection. Assumption, the 15th of August. All Saints' Day and Christmas. Those are days that you have to go to Mass.
It's interesting.
Okay.
Actually, it's not a holy day of obligation, and more people go on that day than
Yeah.
some of the other
Okay,
days.
the novena. The novena is a devotion of a prayer for 9 consecutive days, stating a certain thing that you want, something you want that you're praying for, to the Virgin Mary. Where it came from was Jesus told his disciples to pray together in the upper room for 9 days. You know, again, they're praying to Mary. I don't want to go into a lot of this, but so I've got another 10 minutes. Do you want me to go and get into Christianity?
Just run through the
Yeah, real quick. Novena, Mary and the saints. We most everybody prays to Mary and the saints. We've already talked about that. Go ahead. The Pope, there again, I quoted the Pope saying that if someone's gay, as long as he believes, he's who am I to judge? And then this is Peter, upon this rock I will form my church. His name is Peter. Peter means rock, I'm sorry. The Last Supper, basically, it was the night before the crucifixion when the 12 disciples got together with Jesus, and he did the Holy Communion, ate the bread and the wine, turned the wine into his blood. I did a symbolism there for metaphysical, but we don't have time for that. I don't want to get into it.
What exactly is that?
Basically, it's saying that the 12 things, the 12 people mean faith, inspiration, zeal, power, strength, life, elimination, order, wisdom, love, understanding, and will. That was from the Metaphysical Dictionary that said that I am Christ, and that's the Christ consciousness that we attain for. This was the cross, the crucifixion. You all know the story of the crucifixion. Basically, Christ was hung on a cross, nails in his hands. There was 2 thieves on each side of him, and of course he was there from 9 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it took a long time for him to.
What's that a picture of?
Yeah.
That was a picture of somebody praying for him at the time. It goes into a movie.
That's actually a picture of his son.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, when Jesus is actually asking for the cup to be passed from his lips, Father, and if not, then not my will, but thy will
Okay.
be done.
Wait, how do you guys know this picture? Is it like, it looks pretty
You're
contemporary.
talking about some serious Catholics here. You're
Yeah.
the whole thing. This stuff was so deeply ingrained in us that we can tell a bad picture of exactly what it is.
This is
And make a quote. That's how deeply we were trained in this stuff. But this is very, very significant because this is talking about when Jesus had doubts as to regard because of his fear as to what it was he was about to do.
Like, is it Michelangelo or like what?
Not hard, like,
Like, what is?
but I could get up and sing a song.
That's
Is it from a musical? Like, is this Jesus Christ Superstar?
You mean the picture itself?
Yeah.
Oh God, who knows?
Okay.
Yeah.
God, Terry.
Okay. let's go to the next one is the resurrection and the ascension. Basically, the resurrection is lifting of the whole man into the Christ consciousness. The spirit, soul lifts all facilities of mind until they conform to the absolute ideals of divine mind. The ascension is developing a mastery over lower vibrations from a metaphysical standpoint.
Is this your interpretation?
This is the metaphysical interpretation of it. From
What is the ascension?
Ascending in after Christ died, was in the tomb, and rose. He ascended into heaven 40 days later.
But what makes it so spectacular?
From a Catholic perspective,
Yeah. Well, what is the ascension? Why is that so important?
because he rose from the dead and went into heaven.
Well, the resurrection is the essence of the entire Catholic and Christian faith. Without the resurrection, there is no religion. But what's the ascension say?
The ascension, I only went to the metaphysical part of it.
So the ascension, very much like the assumption, is that Jesus went body and soul, full body. He didn't, his body didn't die. Once his body, he came back and went in full body to heaven.
Right.
The assumption is the Blessed Mother never died. She was taken to heaven without dying.
That's Mary.
The Blessed Mother being Mary?
Here in the Bible, does it say anything about her disappearing?
After the crucifixion, basically, yes.
She disappeared and she never died. She was taken into heaven without having to go through death because she was the Virgin.
When I was in Istanbul, we went, one of our tours was to go to this place is known as the final home of Mary. She actually moved from what was then her home in, what was it, Nazareth. She moved over to this place, but she was brought over from John, who had taken the responsibility of being her son. Built a home. We went to this home, this very interesting place, stone place that she was said to have, truly believe this, said to have lived until she was assumed into heaven, body and soul. She never died. Fascinating.
I certainly wouldn't want to live in the same city where they crucified my son.
Right?
Well,
So can I ask, where does the 40 days of ascension come in? Like, who ascended for 40 days?
they say that Christ ascended 40 days after he was resurrected.
Well, during those 40 days, is that when he was cited by different people?
Remember when Thomas he saw Thomas and he had these holes in his hands and he said, Thomas, you did not believe it was me, and then Thomas got on his knees and said, yes, I did, Father. I'm sorry, Father. Master, rather. Now I know it's you. I'm sorry I doubted you. Doubting Thomas story.
And that's what Jesus said. Better you should believe without seeing.
Right.
Better you should believe without seeing.
Hey.
In Arabic.
Okay, so is there any more terrorists?
Yeah, I've not gotten into Christianity at all, but the rest of it's Christianity. Okay. That's the Eastern Orthodox, or they went off in 1054 and became a different form of Catholicism. They have different beliefs, and they didn't believe in the Holy Spirit at all. They only believed in God. They didn't want any of that. Go ahead. And then go ahead, keep going. How Christianity started. Christ was killed publicly, of course. Christ rose from the public tomb publicly and showed himself to the people, and the public told and the people told everyone else about it, and that's how the church started.
That's how Catholicism.
Yeah, Catholicism started. Go ahead. These are the forms you talked about Christianity. It started with Catholic. Went into the schism that I just talked about with the Orthodox. Martin Luther was in Germany, and he couldn't get the church to change, so he went ahead and started his own church. Was convicted of heresy, went out and hid out for the rest of his life, and wrote the Bible in German and Greek, so the Greeks could read it. And all the other forms, and then of course there was the Anglican up there, which is the King James, because he wanted to get a divorce. He decided to. What?
King whom?
King James. No? Okay. Who was it?
Henry.
Okay, you're right. Henry, yeah, right, okay. But all these forms and everyone had a little different spin on religion, and that's how the whole Protestant thing came about. Yes, Aaron? No? Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Henry VIII, yeah, Henry VIII. Then there was the guy on the bottom right is the Anglican, Calvinism, Lutheran, and that's basically just a few of them. And they all have different beliefs. Christianity is, I want to make sure I do this absolutely right, because I know that, what a crowd you guys are. I don't even have it here. Basically, Christianity said God died for our sins, and He so loved us that if you come back to Him, you are going to be saved. The last slide that I had there is the video is what's his name? Joel Osteen, who basically says at the end of every sermon, just turn yourself over to God and you'll be saved. And it's all about your sins will be forgiven and you'll go to heaven. It's all you have to do. It's that simple. So, namaste. Any other questions?
Thank you. Yes, I have one question, Terry. The symbol of the fish.
That's the Christian, the symbol of the Christian church. Christianity, rather, is a symbol of the fish, not Catholicism.
No, it's Christ, Jesus as the fisherman, as the fisher of men. So Jesus said, "You shall be fishers of men," and that's how He described it.
Sorry, I can't quite hear you there, David. Jesus.
Christ said to His apostles, "I shall make you fishers of men," and the fish represents that concept that they as Christians were fishing, and the fish was a symbol of that blessing that was bestowing.
But it was a secret symbol that they used to draw in the sand. It's called the ichthus.
Well,
They would identify to each other who was a Christian when it was not so good to be a Christian because you'd be killed. So they would be able to tell who was a Christian. They would draw this little fish in the sand called the ichthus, and that was the symbol, secret symbol.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so Marianne.
Up or
No,
oh,
everyone needs to say how they respond.
I'm so ready to go.
Just
Yes.
respond. You got like 30 seconds.
You're better off book in many ways, because you have a lot in you. It's about standing in the faith and trusting
Okay,
God.
guys, here's what I want. I don't want you to teach it. I don't wait until what did you get? What was your response?
Know your material better.
Okay.
That's still teaching you. So you were confused. I want to know your experience. I know we're all fighting to be teachers in here. I just want to know what was your experience of what you just witnessed. That's how he learns.
It was confusing at points.
Okay, great. Say, Sharon.
Thank you.
I was also confused because it was jumping around a lot. And I felt like there were some inaccuracies that you should have sort of vetted before you showed the slide. But the slides, I can tell you put a lot of work into it. You really showed. I felt like what I wanted to hear a little bit more of is like a comparison, Catholicism versus Christianity, other Christian things. And like even with the sacraments, I mean, you could have said, well, like most Christian churches do baptism, but they don't do this or this,
Okay.
They do Eucharist. Some of them do, some of them don't. I would let a little bit more, comparison as you were going along.
Good point. Thank you.
I agree with all the comments so far. There are parts where I was confused. There are other parts where I was very enamored with what you were talking about. I found myself looking things up to just verify or follow along with some of the things that you were saying so I could understand them better. So.
Thank you.
Terry, you're obviously, as Sharon said, your slideshow is well organized, presented. However, had I not been a Catholic, I would probably not know much about Catholicism because there was no clarity as to what those slides were really trying to tell.
Okay.
Karen Frost?
About 10 minutes in, I feel like you got excited about the content and I became engaged more so. I got lost a lot with the moving back and forth between the comparisons between science and mind because I know so little about Catholicism. And so when you sort of went into a metaphysical interpretation of something, I don't feel like I even got what the original Christian interpretation was. And so it just made it harder for me to digest.
Okay.
Aaron?
Coming from no knowledge of this whatsoever, I did learn a lot of miscellaneous things, but there was just kind of random words I'd heard of that was interesting in that conversation, but I had no overview and then when you didn't know certain things or someone would say that's not correct, then I went, well, I don't know what I should believe or what is true here. So I just thought, well, I'm just going to enjoy the conversation. I'll have to do the research to figure out what is the real deal.
Okay. Helen?
Yeah, similar to Aaron, actually. Like I got bits and pieces, bits and pieces of Christianity, bits and pieces of Catholicism, because again, I don't know very much about it. I didn't grow up in it, and so I'm still left a little bit confused as to how did one evolve from the other, or how did and where it all fits, but. I appreciate the nuggets that I did get, and again felt like I have a better or a more understanding that there's a lot more in Catholicism than I realized, like because I didn't know about sacraments and all of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Karen?
Oh, Karen Mitchell. I'm sorry, Karen Mitchell.
So your slides were beautiful. And I agree with what everyone was saying. I felt very uncomfortable for you. I felt like I just felt it was very scattery and that you just weren't sure really how you were going to get through it at all. And I felt, bad for you in that way. And, cause you felt kind of uncomfortable and the tree at the end, I would have liked the tree at the beginning because I think that really helped us to see, gee, where did all these things come from, So that maybe would have given me a better idea of the different factions that we were trying to talk about.
Thank you.
Right. So, who did your slideshow?
I did them with one of my staff. I picked them out and told them where to put them.
Okay. Because for me, I didn't feel that you understood what your slideshow was. And right at the top, you had Christianity and Catholicism, right? So right at the top, you showed us a slide that said Jesus, Peter, Martin Luther King, back to Jesus.
Martin Luther.
I'm sorry, Martin Luther King. Jesus, Peter, Martin Luther, back to Jesus.
Yeah.
Had you done a conversation, a class, traced that, you might have actually said something. But like most of the people in the class, it was very difficult to follow you, and I understand Catholicism. And so I felt like you didn't really use your slides. I mean, if you're going to have slides that are that intense, you should not have a piece of paper there that you're trying to read from. That basically doesn't even refer back to the slide that much. I mean, the only reason to have a slideshow is because, as many of these students have shown you, they, like Karen did, she has her slides, she knows where she's going. The slides are a guide, it's a guide show for the speaker. It's the only reason speakers use slides, because that's their style. There comes a slide, I know exactly what I'm going to say about that next slide. Oh, okay, so, and you've done it in such a way that it's a roadmap for you. Yours were like booby traps all over the place because you didn't know what you were looking at. So that was very disappointing. And then right at the top, you told us way too much about what the class was going to be. By the time you finished, I was exhausted. I was like, oh my God, really? You're going to pull all that off in 45 minutes to an hour? So you didn't need to do that. The only reason why it's worked when they've done that is because it's been on the board for us to look at. They've showed us, here's what we're going to cover. And I go, oh, great. And then it went off the board and you started. Okay, but you kept talking about what you were going to do, and I couldn't keep it in my head as to where we were going to be going. You gotta be careful when you say things like, and we know that in such a year, there will be this many Muslims. We believe, we teach principles not bound by precedents, and we don't believe any of that stuff. Not necessarily. So you weren't really presenting it from your point of view, or from sort of our point of view. You said something about Bethlehem where Jesus was born with graffiti. And I was kind of surprised at the reverence you had for this place. But you didn't give me much history about it, just that you were appalled that there was graffiti in this place. It was odd.
Really?
For me.
Okay.
I was like, what do you care if there's graffiti there?
Well, they've ruined this beautiful place.
Like, what's that have to do with Catholicism or Christianity? You wasted a lot of your time on your reactions to things that did not teach us anything.
Okay.
And you do that a lot in your talks. Right? And you'll veer off and tell some story that doesn't really pertain to what you're trying to teach us. Did Jesus walk on water? Did he really turn water to wine?
That's the belief from Catholicism.
Yes, you made me think that you believed it. That if we had the consciousness, we'd all walk on water. If we had the consciousness, we could all turn water into wine. Is that true?
When I looked at it in the metaphysical dictionary, that's
I want Terry Taylor.
Well, I read it and I believe.
Can you? Is that what you believe? Do you know that's what we teach as science mind?
No, I read it in the metaphysical dictionary.
But you're not here to teach us some book you read. I read tons of books. I'm not going to teach that book if it's not in alignment with what we teach here.
Okay.
I'm going to distill what I read and teach what works, what I'm in alignment with, and then point out what I'm not in alignment with. And frankly, the answer is yes. We probably could walk on water if we had the consciousness. So you do not stand in, I don't think you really know what you believe, Terry. I tricked you just then.
Yeah.
So you went to the answer you thought I wanted as opposed to look me right in the face and say, yes, James, that's what we teach. Consciousness demonstrates. I believe I could walk on water. But you just say things that you read. You don't have the foundation underneath it. That's what you have to work on. Okay, never start reading a prayer and then stop and tell us a story. You start, I believe in God the Father Almighty. Now, what this prayer is don't do that. Because you already had me reading the prayer, and you stopped, and then you went back to where you left off, as opposed to reading the prayer. Okay? Did you put that slide together for the 7 sacraments?
Yeah.
Or did it come as a slide like that?
It came as a slide like that.
Okay. Bad slide.
Yeah, notice it was
Totally out of order. Baptism's first, Holy Communion, Confirmation, matrimony, perhaps, Holy Orders, whatever. When I get sick, better be the last one. So they were just way off, and then you bounced all over, and I couldn't follow it. And you didn't understand. That was the worst part. You didn't understand what is confirmation? And when does it happen in a person's life?
13 years old and...
No, not 13.
What?
Third grade.
No.
So what are you, like 8?
No,
Well,
absolutely not.
Third grade is confirmation.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
It's 8th grade?
Absolutely.
I did mine in the 4th.
Sixth grade, sorry.
So you didn't let us know any of that.
And in Mexico,
You said confirmation is when you, as an adult, you come in.
It's like a bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
It's coming into
You should have
adult.
said that.
Okay.
Not unlike the Jewish bar mitzvah, it's when a child comes of age.
Okay.
And they pick a name.
Yeah.
And who confirms you?
The bishop.
Has to be a bishop. Only a bishop can confirm. Things like that are fascinating and interesting.
And also,
Karen Frost would have asked you, what's a bishop?
and you have that sponsor also, and that's an important part also.
I wanted to ask what CCD was. Somebody in my town that connected with it.
Okay, good. That's it. So Terry, how do you feel?
About like you all said, not real good.
Okay.
And I really, really prepared for it, and this is what came out.
Well, you over-prepare. You freak yourself out. You over-prepare. I've tried for 2 years now to teach you. Pick 5 points. Pick 10 points. Put them up there and know them. You over-prepare. You try so hard to be perfect. You can't even get. You're not even on the level of understanding.
My fear was if I don't cover all these things, then something's going to be left out, and it's not going to be complete.
You almost left everything up for most of us.
Yeah.
So
I got it.
I don't know how clear to be with you about you've got to be simple. And if you're looking at a whole thing, I know you want to teach, Terry, but it's a 2-hour class you usually have to teach. And no, granted, in a 2-hour class you're not teaching all of Catholicism. But if you know you have an hour, and you're going to teach Catholicism versus Christianity, by the way, because you took 55 minutes on Catholicism. So already you did not really plan this class correctly. But the class was Catholicism versus Christianity. Tell us what they both are, why there's what happened, why are they different, how are they different. You didn't get to any of that. So pick 10 points. Or let's see, you got an hour, you got 6 points to every 10 minutes, how many, 12 points, 5 minutes for each point. And then just go through it. It's got to simplify this, or else there's no way you can teach.
Yeah.
Because people are not going to sit in a class with you if you go bouncing all over the place and we can't follow you. You're not.
Okay.
And no, anyway, I made my point. You know what I mean.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, great.
Can I ask something?
Yes, you may.
Where did the Gnostics fit in?
The Gnostic Bible.
Oh, I can't hear anything. Sorry, it's all funny. The mic.
Oh, just,
Yeah. So where do the Gnostics fit in? Are they part of Christianity?
The Gnostic Bibles are not part of Catholicism or Christianity. In fact, they've kind of distanced themselves from it.
But the question
But
is
they're
whether or not
excited.
they're Christian, because they do follow the Christ. They have an understanding of their own as to what the Christ is. Is it Christian in the broad general sense? Yeah, you could put them under that great umbrella.
We're Christian in the broad sense.
We're closer to Gnostics than anything because
That's
the Gnostics
true.
were the knowers.
That's true.
That's what Gnostic means.
And I had heard, what are the Gospels according to Mary? Aren't they part of the Gnostic?
According to Mary
Mary
Magdalene,
Magdalene.
Yeah, I was
Isn't she
raised.
part of the
part of the
Gnostic?
Gnostic Bible.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, I was raised very fundamentalist Christian, so a lot of this stuff was just anathema to us. You learned what they told you in Bible class, and that was it. And you don't ask questions. You take it for real.
Is CCD the Catholic version of Hebrew school? So you do that, where confirmation is
Yes.
the same thing.
Here's the thing, I taught those classes. When I was in West Side Story, I taught CCD classes to St. Gregory the Great at 88 and Amsterdam Avenue.
I had a best friend who was Catholic and she was going to CCD, and I remember going, "Why do you have to do that? Can't we just go to the mall? What the hell?"
Yeah, that's how I know about it, because my friends all of a sudden couldn't hang out. And I was like, what is going on? It was a Saturday. And,
Yeah, really.
and I was like, what is it? And they didn't even, they're like, I don't know.
It's the rules, honey.
Yeah,
They didn't
Learn the
explain what it
rules.
was. I didn't even know it was Catholic oriented. So I asked my mom, I was like, what is everybody doing on Saturday?
My friend was just so into it. She's like, "This is where we learn to love God." I'm like, it is.
My friends acted like they slept through the whole thing, which I'm sure they did. Just young people. I was like, they kind of nuts are those.
Oh, they are addicted to me. They are.
You can see I had makeup reactions.
Clear our notes for earlier. That was making me laugh so hard. I'm so sorry.
That was a tough assignment too, because you got some people in the room who really do know this stuff pretty deeply. There's stuff to cover.
I'd offer you guys cashews, but you're not here.
I was going to say, are we on an official break?
Yes, we are on an official.
Everybody just sort of.
Okay. So James, can I ask some questions? I don't know if you addressed these at the beginning of class or not, but are we having our exam next Thursday?
Yes.
Yes, we are, sweetie.
Oh, did he leave the room?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is yes, because we did ask.
And did he also give, well, I guess it doesn't matter. Okay, just.
And you don't get them. Is what you're saying.
Pardon?
I said he gave us all the answers and he told us not to tell you.
I just want to know who's wearing the microphone in the bathroom this time.
I have a request. I haven't heard it, but if he doesn't exit up the timeline, will you record it?
Sure. I should charge that. I don't know if I can. If you promise it. You said.
Are you
Yes.
Aaron
At 10 o'clock, I would. Should I come back and take this? Or do we know what's taken in? Or? I have to do it.
No, I'm asking if that's not good.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave it to the seniors.
Tell her.
I do. Thank you. I really should eat dinner. It was like, I had lunch at 4. So,
I yogurt.
and lunch was tomatoes and cheese.
Mariana, don't get offended. I can leave it 10 minutes, my sister, so I will be kind of slowly going back.
I'm just like you. I don't like that. Why are you opening these? Like almonds from the party.
Let's try.
You might like the get like caramel or something.
Oh, yeah.
Strawberries.
It is. You all ready? Did you put that mic on there?
Yeah, I have to do it this way.
Mariana, Aaron has a confession to make for you.
I already told her.
Or you already told her.
What?
I believe it.
Well, I feel sad that we're starting, late, because it's actually a great presentation, but you'll be with me for the
She can watch it. She can watch the rest of it all night.
Yeah, she'll do it later. Or even on her way home.
These ones were awesome.
You know what you call it, Blue Moose? That's a great Holy moly.
Hold that earring, what's that?
They're boycotting.
There we go.
They're not, they're boycotting. They're
Recording the holy molies?
Is that feel secure?
Yeah, how is it?
Yeah, you know you're fine. It just needs to feel secure.
Hey, remind me of the things that's like those.
Bods, one more day, that's it.
One more day.
Bods.
Excited.
One more day.
One more day. I
Right.
was speaking to that speaker once again. Thank you.
You're so cute. Sweetie, I just have to get your PowerPoint back.
And so it is.
Wow.
Okay, let me give you your time.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Stop that. To not do what I want to do.
What?
Wow, these are good.
They grow on you.
I'll have mine later. Can you hear me?
They're
Is this on?
definitely dry. Dinner time tomorrow.
We're gonna do the same thing we did, because I don't want to waste any time.
Okay, ready?
Yes, we're gonna do the same thing we did before, ladies, because I don't wanna mess with it.
David, just.
Over back and forth.
Yeah, back and forth again.
So are we resetting the time?
haven't turned it on yet.
Oh, good, yeah.
Egypt, don't
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm just being aware for everybody. Yeah. I'm not you.
And it's yours.
Good evening, class. I'm so excited and happy that you're here. This is going to be an intro night. And so for the next 8 weeks being together, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what we will be looking at this evening. So next slide, please. So this is the overview. As you can see, I'm starting with ancient thought, ancient wisdom, because the thread that I would like to tie in is how it really began with ancient wisdom and how it weaves itself into what the ancient wisdom individuals actually knew then. It's been weaved into all of these teachers into who we are today as New Thought. And I'm also going to be talking about seven actually, New Thought individuals. And I'm starting with Anton Mesmer. I'm going into Emerson. And then I'm beginning with the father, P.P. Quimby. I'm going into Mary Baker Eddy. And then I will be going into, after Mary Baker Eddy, it will be Divine Science, and then it will be the Fillmore's Unity, and it will be ending with Our Beloved Poems. Next slide, please. And so this is a couple of ancient wisdom individuals that I brought forth. And I made them big enough, but I will read them. Plato said the beginning is the most important part of the work. And he also said that when he, God, was framing the universe, he put intelligence in soul and soul in body, that he might be the creator of a work which was by nature fairest and best. Next slide, please. And then here's Socrates. To know is to know that you know nothing. That is the meaning of true knowledge. And all men's souls are immortal, but the souls of the righteous are immortal and divine. Next slide. And I have Jesus slides later, so I just decided to put the I am and all that Jesus stood with and as his life. Knock at the door, it's open. The world, the word, the way, the bread. And then Plotinus, who actually Ernest Holmes himself studied and read, and I know that others have. God is not external to anyone, but is present with all things, though they are ignorant that he is so. Next slide, please.
Mariana, who was Plotinus?
Plotinus was one of the Greek philosophers back in, I believe, the 425, around there. I'm sorry, I didn't get the date, although it's
AD or BC?
BC. Yes, yes. And then the Buddha. Would anyone like to read these two? Erin?
Sure. Every morning we're born again. What we do today is what matters most. And the other one, three things, I'm hiding glasses apparently. Three things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth.
The truth, yes. So that's what we are uncovering on this walk together for these next weeks, and tonight just stepping into opening up to how truth actually was really established with all of these individuals, and we're walking it now. Next slide, please. And I love Shakespeare, and I love there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And then be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. And so what I love about Shakespeare is he also knew that nothing is good or bad, only thinking makes it so. And really all of the teachings, thought is everything.
Did you know why he wrote that?
I do not know why he wrote that. For me, it was a hit of intuition that it came to him.
He actually wrote that. It's at the end of As You Like It.
Ah.
And he wrote it for his character, so that, and it basically was about all of his writings, so that we started to understand that no matter what was going on in the world, our opinion of it, our experience of it was more important than the facts themselves.
which really does align with our teaching.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Next. And so here we start with Franz Anton Mesmer. And basically, as you can see on this slide, this is what I'm going to be covering. Who he was, his theory, and that he was a man of contrasts. Next slide, please.
Wait, I'm sorry. I couldn't
Oh.
read all that fast.
Oh, I was just giving the overview. I'm going who he was. And one of the real main keys here, actually, so thank you, is that his unintentional legacy would prove to be hypnosis. But really, at the time, he had no idea that what he was doing was going to lay the groundwork for real hypnosis and real psychology and psychotherapy to come forward. And I'll tell you who actually brought that into fruition as we go along.
Can you tell me what animal magnetism is?
Yes, it's coming. This is what I'm going to be covering. And it's coming. And then he was a man of discoveries, a man of contrasts, and I can say this now, he was really a man of mixed messages. He was, at one point they thought he was a charlatan, but really he wasn't, because he really wanted to help people, but he did want to get paid highly. And he was a snob, and yet he had real compassion for the poor. And one of the things he did was he would treat the poor for free, but then he would charge all of the rich French nobles a huge amount of money because he just felt that the poor were not treated fairly. So we begin now with the next slide. So he was born the 23rd of May in 1734 in Germany, and he did go to college in 1752 at the University of Ingolstadt, and he studied theology, but he never finished, and there is no record of him graduating or the fact that he was ordained. But it's interesting to note that he did start in becoming in theology, and we don't know what his idea was, but he didn't finish. In 1759, I fell out here, but I'm back. And the years between 1755 and 59, they don't know where he was. So in 1759, he went to the University of Vienna claiming he had a PhD, but nobody really knows if he did. And he did 1 year law before transferring to medicine, which then was the ground floor of all that unfolded, and he really loved that. Next slide, please. And so animal magnetism. And he actually got this theory from Isaac Newton, who felt that there was a gravitational fluid that each one had in our body temples. Thank you, Connie. And so, Karen, would you actually read what animal magnetism is for me, please?
Yes, the magnetic fluid is what animates a body and is responsible for health, and disease is disorder of the fluid. The presence of the magnetic fluid in us gives us animal magnetism, which simply means vital magnetism. More if we are healthy, less if we are ill.
Thank you. And what's interesting about this also is it was Quimby when and I'll get to that later, but it was Quimby who realized that it was an energy and a force. But back in those days, they felt it was a fluid. But since we realize that we are energy beings, it makes sense that it was energy moving. Next slide, please. And so these are some of the methods that he used. Before he used magnets, there was an individual named Maximilian Hell, H-E-L-L, who began to use magnets on the body to pull the fluid to where the disorder was. And so for a time, he used these magnets, but he also felt that he didn't need the magnets because it was also his concentration and his way of being able to be with the individual that many times moved the energy. And he also found that with hand passes. So just by accident, he began to notice that when he moved his hand, that, I'll just say, energy or the fluid was beginning to move to that place where the healing needed to happen. So, and another interesting thing that he did was, at one point, he had so many clients coming to him because he began to become well known, that he found that he could magnetize other objects and water and glass. And so at one point he magnetized a tree, and he tied ropes to the branches and had the people sit around the tree with the ropes and put the ropes, since they were magnetized from the tree, put the ropes to the places where the body needed the healing. And that worked very well. So, and this last back wet, it was actually a tub, and I do have a picture of it in the next slide. It was a tub used with rods. They'd rest in magnetized water, and many times the individuals would sit around the tub, and Mesmer would be holding one part of the rod, and the individual would be holding the other part, and the energy then would move to that part of the body that again needed healing. Many times what he did was also he would give a certain kind of medicine that would purge. So individuals not on site were throwing up, but probably he felt that getting something out of the system made it more susceptible to the new healing energy that was to go to that place. And another thing that made him different than individuals to come, he believed that the healing crisis had to come through convulsions and fits and spurts, so to speak. And that's how he felt that the healing was really happening. But others will prove down the road that that didn't need to happen. But that's how Mesmer thought that the healing had to come forth. Next slide, please. And this is, I love that I found this. This was actually the Backwet. And he developed, that was his. The magnets were Maximilian Hell. He ended up devising this.
What is this?
This is the Backwet that I talked about, the container that had the magnetized water. He would magnetize the water, he would magnetize the rods, and then there would be shavings of iron. Because again, he felt that the steel and the iron pulled the magnetic energy to where the place needed to be healed. But he felt that you had to either throw up or go into a convulsion. And he did get a lot of demonstrations, absolutely. But he never, he did not correlate yet that it was mind or suggestion. He felt it was all the power that he was using. And this is what then other individuals came to find out, especially Quimby. One of the things about, well, there were many things about Mesmer. He had a huge ego. He always wanted to be known. But the thing about all of his theories, he would not allow them to have experiments on them. So every time he went to a medical board, they just said no, because you're not willing to have your work experimented on. So he actually spent his whole life not being noticed. But he said, I'll beat them by being successful. So he actually was either moving out of Paris or moving back to Paris. But he did get a huge clientele, and he was very good at what he did during that time. And he also then, next slide, please. So yes, it was the medical community that said, you're not willing to prove your theories, so we're not going to be able, it's not scientific. So we're not going to be able to give you that recognition. And he often stated scientific languaging, saying, well, observations have shown that, but that wasn't really good enough. Next slide, please. So this is where the Marquis de, and I'm not good with French names, so if Puységur, I'm going to call him the Marquis. So the Marquis was a rich landowner who was also in the French Revolution. And couple of his brothers had heard about the Society of Universal Harmony, which in 1781, Mesmer developed and opened. And what you had to do was, he actually called it a society. And he was going to get people to pay to come into this society, and he was going to teach them some of the methods. But interesting note about Mesmer, he didn't want to give it all up. He really liked being secretive. And so he was going to give you so much of it. But he always wanted to be recognized. He always wanted to be on top of the stage, so to speak, because a lot of his work also had a cult feeling around it. When you went to get healed, because so many people started coming to him, he would be dressed in a robe, and he would have his iron rod and for the show. And it worked for a lot of people. So anyway, he took this class with his brothers, and he lived on this huge estate. And so a couple of farmers were having a problem. So he was, okay, let me try this. So when he did the hand passes, he had the opposite effect. They didn't go into fits. All of a sudden, they went into the trance, and they were susceptible to healing or whatever. The Marquis had known what was going on with them. He would say, oh, well, now you're going to be well. And they came out of it and were healed. So he believed also, so he really is the individual who began to witness that things were changing, that you didn't have to go into fits and spurts. There was a way for just you to go into it naturally and get healed in that way. And so he began to do experiments with all of the people on his property, and probably also why it worked, he feels, is because they were in a natural setting. Not like this. Squeeze it. Squeeze me. Thank you for the patience.
Okay, just one stick.
Oh my. Glue?
Get staples next. See if that holds.
Thank you. And so the Marquis also felt, because it was a natural setting, the people and the fact that that countryside didn't know about Mesmer. So he just felt it was more of a natural way. The people just opened up. And he also felt that it was the operator who when the operator stood in confidence, then the individual just was able to relax and go within for the healing. And so I'm going to wrap that up by saying the Marquis is the one who started to discover that with belief in the believing and the will, that there was a change. He was the one who also started to recognize that there was something more than the hand passes that meet the eye, that there was something about the operator who, when the operator stood in self-confidence, then the individual was able to just let go and go within. And so that is the contribution that Mesmer began, and it was the Marquis actually who started taking it to a greater degree of stepping into how the individual could open and be healed. And so the next individual that we're...
Can I just ask something? Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
I'm in awe because I've never heard of the Marquis, and I was always under the impression that Mesmer was responsible for a form of hypnosis or something with the mind.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just saying I didn't realize it was so much on the physical level, because I thought that's... So yeah, that's a whole new thing. So I'm a bit confused though, because I thought it was Mesmer that was dealing with the mind.
Yes, and I read several books actually, and because I was like, well, wait a minute. And as the first slide said, he didn't really realize that it was what he was actually opening the door to, because he felt that it was the magnets or the mesmerized object that were really doing the work. And it was then the Marquis who, by accident, when he did the hand pass, noticed that the individual went into a trance, and that they were, because they trusted the operator, who was the Marquis, they were more open to then for suggestion. So Mesmer opened the door, but it was other individuals like the Marquis who actually began to establish it on a higher level, that there was more of a connection. And it was Quimby who really got it, which is who I'll go into after Ralph Waldo Emerson. But I spent a lot of time on Mesmer, because I kept seeing, well, wait a minute, how is his association with mind? And yes, he opened the door by the investigation of the inner, but he also had different tools, like the rod, like the tree, like he had to magnetize something. Whereas later on, they realized that you didn't need that. By a suggestion and by the trust of the operator, that you could open up and then go and be in that open state to really begin to know mind.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So Ralph Waldo Emerson, to me, I spent a lot of time on him also, and this is going to be, again, an 8-week course. So I am going to move fast now because I want to get through everybody. Fascinating man, really, and I could see why Holmes and so many other individuals really appreciated him. So this is what I'm going to cover. Father of the American Renaissance, his influence, era of transcendentalism, nature, and he was a poet, writer, speaker. Next slide, please. And these are just a couple of things that he wrote. And Sharon, would you read those for me, please, if you can?
I'm sorry. The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be. And what lies behind us, what lies before us, are tiny matters compared to what lies within us.
Yes. Next slide, please. And what made him the father of the American Renaissance was the fact that back in the turn of we're talking about the 18th century, it was the Germans and the English who really dominated thought and were really looking at Romanticism, which was self-knowledge, which was looking within. But it was all European. It was nothing American. And as Emerson and several other individuals were reading Swedenborg and Carlyle and several other individuals, Kant, that Emerson realized, I want to make this American. I want to begin to develop a way of thinking, writing, and speaking that was going to be American. And so he put intellectualism on the map. He refused to run with the strictly European ideas, and his mission was to forge a new philosophy. Next slide, please. So basically his life, 1803, he attended Harvard. He went to Harvard Divinity School. His first sermon, he marries. He resigns he was a minister and then decided that it wasn't what he really wanted. It was too restrictive. And he married Lydia, and actually I'm going to talk about when 36 he published his Nature, but his breakout year was 1834. Yes.
Was he aligned with a particular religious philosophy? Was he
Unitarian is what his father grew up in, but his father did die when he was 11 years old, and there were 4 brothers, and his mother raised them all and put 3 of them through Harvard. So there you go. So no lack and limitation there. Next slide, please. So his influences were from Plato. You know, the mind is urged to ask for one cause of many effects. And so really, again, tying in the ancient wisdom, it was Plato back in the day who knew that. And diving still into the profound self, assured that it shall arrive at an absolute and sufficient one, a one that shall be all. And so one of the influences, John Locke, he was a German, and he was very big in Europe. And what he said was the human mind was a machine that gathers information. All human thought and emotion comes from experience through the five senses, which, as you'll go to the next slide, Kant said, wait a minute, there's more to this than that. So Kant was from Germany, and they're all around the same time. And his essay, because also there was a lot of enlightenment going on in Europe. And that's what was attractive to the Americans. It was like, wow, look at all these individuals and what they're doing over in Europe. And so Kant and other philosophers of the time of the Enlightenment movement were about knowledge, especially knowledge of self. And what he showed was there existed a class of ideas and forms that came not through experience, but through intuition. So this is where also that divine spark of intuition is being opened up. And that's who Emerson was reading this, and then as Ernest Holmes was reading it, and probably Troward, there were many individuals then that were tapping into, yes, there has to be something else. Next slide, please. And then in his own words, Ellen, can you read that from there?
Read the one on the left. Our greatest glory is not in never failing, but in rising up every time we fail.
Yes. And actually, if we look at Edison, he probably read Emerson also. Because look at, he failed 1,000 times before he got the light bulb right. But he didn't let failure stop him. And this one is, that which we persist in doing becomes easier. Not that the task itself has become easier, but that our ability to perform it has improved. So practice, practice, practice. Next slide, please. So the Transcendentalist movement, basically, it started in 1937. They came together at, the gentleman's name was Mr. Ripley in Boston, Massachusetts, and it was about 8 of them that got together, and they began to sit around and talk philosophy and talk how do we want to establish this way of thinking that is only American. And so the philosophy was based on the belief in a higher reality that could be found through human senses or experience. Something existed beyond the senses that an individual could know intuitively. A greater power exists to unify individual souls. The oversoul exists in everything. And in reading all that I read about Emerson, it was just fascinating because I read some of the things about these meetings, how they all contributed, they all sat together, and they all brought up these amazing ideas, which then, sparked Emerson to begin to write poetry and then nature. Next slide, please. And then he steps in and he wrote Nature in 1836, and it is an exploration of our relationship with nature and established both science and religion exist only to describe and explain nature, which he called wild and beautiful, much like man's inner self. I love that. Nature itself is a language, an expression of the laws of forms or ideas that lie beneath the visible world. For him, also, it was really about when we're in nature, it's just the openness and the real ability to be present in the moment. Next slide, please. And so to wrap up, Nature was his breakout work. And then from there, as he was discovering more about what nature was and about his own self going through crisis, is when he came forth with self-reliance and character and circles. And so everything then was an offshoot in many ways from nature. And so we move into our man, Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, who said, "And the embracing of the true Christ is the resurrection from the dead. For the dead know nothing. Therefore, to be dead in sin or ignorance is a separation from God or truth. To know God is to know ourselves, and this knowledge is in Christ or truth." the thing about Phineas Quimby, he was poor, and he had the Bible. And next slide, please.
What did that quote mean?
To me, it means, when I chose it and read it, that if I'm not willing to investigate who I am or to be open to who I am, and I just take everything that I see as truth in that may not be truth, and if I'm not looking at what do I believe, who am I, what am I thinking, what is my life unfolding as, then I'm dead. And in that dead is ignorance. And so what am I ignorant to? What am I willing not to see? And so as I begin to be willing to discover who I am, what do I believe? Then I open up the door to knowing who I am and discovering there's more to me than meets the eye. And I step into a greater willingness to discover myself as truth.
Would you read that again?
And the embracing of the true Christ is the resurrection from the dead, for the dead know nothing. Therefore, to be dead in sin or ignorance is a separation from God or truth, and to know God is to know ourselves, and this knowledge is in Christ or truth. And mind you, this was all a discovery for him in many ways because, and next slide, please. He was an inventor for a lot of his life, and he was just going along living. And then all of a sudden, he went to a lecture that this, his name was Peyton, came over from France, and he attended this lecture, and the man was a mesmerist, and he all of a sudden went, wow, what's this? And that's when he stepped into mesmerism. Next slide, please. And so I'm just going to read one of these and we'll move forward. The wisdom of God does not go into the clouds to call truth down, nor into the deep to call God up, but shows us that God is in us, even in our speech. Next. So basically, when he discovered mesmerism, he was using Lucius, who was a medium. Well, he would put him in a trance, and this individual then could know exactly what was going on if somebody had an ailment. But he couldn't do it if there was rainstorms or different kinds of things, because he just felt that it wasn't going well then, the experiment, and he had a lot of failures. So what he was doing one time during one of his healings, there was a thunderstorm and he didn't pay attention to it. And all of a sudden he realized that because he wasn't paying attention to the storm or the failure, that the operator, who actually was Lucius, was more receptive and open, and so was the individual who was being healed. So he got it in that moment that there has something to do with the way he's thinking and how he was. So he was the one who then opened the door to, there's more to the passing of the hand or holding hands. It's more about mind. Yes.
Could you give me a little more on who Lucius was?
Lucius was his partner that he met, and he was an individual that he trained, but he would also put him in trances, and he was the clairvoyant. He used this man as a clairvoyant and a medium to be able to, for instance, look at Sharon and say, okay, you have this, you have this, you have this. But what he realized in that experiment with the thunderstorm was that he also felt what was going on with the individual, and he realized it was because this individual was thinking about it. He was able to tap into that and recognize that there was the connection of mind, and that he didn't need Lucius, because many times later on he said that Lucius probably swayed what was going on or suggested what was going on, because what Lucius began to say was, oh yeah, you know, Terry has a toe thing and his foot. But the thing is, Terry already told me what he had. So then we already knew that. So then Quimby realized that that's what was going on. And so he began to realize that there was more of a mind connection. Next slide, please.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And then I'm just going to read one of these. So all the truth that came through the man, and one of the things, pardon me, don't stop the thing. So all the truth that came through the man Jesus was Christ, and it was the garment of Jesus. So Jesus was clothed with the gospel of the wisdom of God. And as Quimby began to do his real work in letting go of Lucius and really discovering, because he realized that there was an error in mind. He was really the one who established that there was error in mind. And because he also read the Bible and he read the teaching of Jesus, he was really self-teaching him how to step into more of the truth. Next slide, please. And so this is his theory, that there is no intelligence, no power or action in matter of itself, that the spiritual world to which our eyes are closed by ignorance or unbelief is the real world, that in it lie all causes for every effect visible in the natural world. And so through his study, with beginning in mesmerism, and then his method would be that individuals would come to him and they would sit next to him and they would just talk. And what Quimby did then was he would talk to the person and just keep talking and letting them know that the confusion that they were feeling in mind wasn't really true, that the real natural way of being is health and clarity. And a lot of times the individuals would just say, because they talked with him, that there would just be this healing that would happen because Quimby just took the time to be with them and just let them know, no, that's in matter. That's not in who you are. And there would be healings that unfolded. So from all of these opportunities that he had with individuals coming to him, he was able to come up with this theory because he absolutely started to investigate it more on a higher level. Next slide, please. And he also said that if this spiritual life can be revealed to us, if we can understand ourselves, we shall then have our happiness or misery in our own hands. And so this was the premise of what he would be talking to people about, taking responsibility. It's not really, it's healable. I don't know the exact words he used. I feel that perhaps on that line. Next slide, please. So we're now moving into Mary Baker Eddy. I'm not going to go into the whole Mary Baker Eddy Quimby thing, no. Mary Baker Eddy, basically, as we all do know, that she went to him and she got a healing, and he was kind enough to give her the notes, a lot of notes, because he did share his notes with people. And Mary Baker Eddy just ran with them because a lot of her philosophy, as we know, came from Quimby. So she was born July 16th, 1879. She started the church, 75, science and health. And also, sickness is an illusion that can be corrected by prayer alone. Next slide. And this was her theology, that the spiritual world is the only reality and is entirely good, and that the material world with its evil, sickness, and death is an illusion. Humankind is a perfect idea of God or divine mind. Mortal man is simply humankind's distorted view of self. And she was big on that mortal man. Next slide, please. And in their prayer work, the process involves a scientist engaging in a silent argument to affirm herself the unreality of the matter. So whereas Quimby probably argued for it with an individual next to him, the Christian scientists do not. It claims to lead to a state of consciousness where these things do not exist. What heals is a realization that there is nothing really to heal. And that is also what Quimby, all of this really comes from Quimby in many ways.
Christian Science fair?
Supplication meaning that there's no begging. You're not begging. You already know it in mind. Next slide, please. And just a couple of her thoughts. You embrace your body and your thought, and you should delineate upon it thoughts of health, not sickness. And to write truth first on the tablet of one's own heart. This is the sanity and perfection of living and my human ideal. And as, for instance, the thread within our teaching really does begin its roots with Phineas Quimby and with Mary Baker Eddy, who, as you know, also Ernest Holmes studied with Emma Curtis Hopkins. She was the last student that he took on was Holmes. And so a lot of this that they were working with weaves into our teaching today. Next slide, please. And one more thought of hers. Accidents are unknown to God or immortal mind. And we must leave the mortal basis of belief and unite with the one mind in order to change the notion of chance to the proper sense of God's unerring direction and thus bring out harmony. And basically, just very quickly, in my research, I saw a woman interview a Christian Scientist practitioner. And it was very fascinating because this practitioner really never brought up anything about Mary Baker Eddy's real teaching. But what they say, how she was healed when she fell on the ice and her leg and her internal organs she was in some ways dying. The story goes, and I read it in another article, that Mary Baker Eddy took out her Bible. She was present with the couple of healings that Jesus performed. And she was present with how Jesus did it. And she just became still in that moment with how he did it. And all of a sudden, something changed in her body.
Well, I don't know what her illness was or what was going on in her body. I forgot.
She fell on, well, one of the major ones was she fell on an ice going to a temperance meeting. She broke her leg and injured some of her internal organs. And they didn't think she was going to make it. And so she pulled out the Bible and started to be present with some of the healing teachings of Jesus. And they said that all of a sudden something shifted within her, and she got up, went into the other room, and they were like, oh my, you're here. And so that's what she bases, but we actually know differently, and
She actually did go through it.
that's what I mean. But but the Christian Scientists and the articles I read, no. They're like, no, she did it on her own, and we're not giving any credit to anybody. Absolutely. Next slide, please. So now we're moving into divine science because they're all layering on top of each other. This is Melinda Kramer, and that is Nona Brooks. And Melinda Kramer also learned Christian Science. And in 1870, she moved, well, I guess we can go to the next slide. And some of the history. In 1870, Melinda went to San Francisco. And in 1888, she opened the College of Spiritual Science, and she published a periodical called Harmony, which was, and she also, Emma Curtis Hopkins would come out to San Francisco and give talks and classes. And so actually, Kramer was an offshoot of Christian Science. And she also then went to Denver, and that's where she met Nona Brooks. And they really got along well. And Kramer taught Nona Brooks and basically ordained Nona Brooks in 89. And then that's when Nona Brooks opened up Divine Science College, and it was incorporated with what Melinda Kramer began. And then coming together, they developed Divine Science. And I just used this Ernest Holmes quote because what's interesting is that Ernest Holmes was actually ordained as a divine scientist. And so you are more than you appear to be. Life is greater than you have ever known it. The best is yet to come. So, next slide, please. And so this is really, of all the next slides we're going to do, the bottom line is the keystone of divine science just is really what our teaching is. And so Would you like to read that for me?
I can't see.
Okay, I'll read it then. The keystone of divine science. The affirmation of the limitless being of God, equally present everywhere. God is pure spirit, manifesting at all phases, at all times. Creation is the emanation of life and substance from God. God is self-manifestation. Spirit and substance are but two aspects of the same reality. God is self-manifestation, God is self-knowingness. So I feel that a lot of what Holmes also based our teaching on is everything that Quimby and Mary Baker Eddy and Nona and Melinda were doing at the time. And Holmes, of course, made it his own. Next slide, please.
Question here?
Yes.
Is divine science still around today? Are there churches with divine science?
I didn't get to that part.
There's a few.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's a few.
Yes, I was so, yes.
Texas and Colorado.
Texas and Colorado. Thank you. Next slide, please. And also the rest of the keystone is matter is divine energy manifest as form. Humans are in essence divine and one with their creator. Their statement of being is God is all, both invisible and visible, one presence, one mind, one power is all. This one that is all perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. Man is the individualized expression of God and is ever one with this perfect love and perfect substance. So there's our teaching right there. Yes? Next slide, please. And we're moving now into Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And in their later years, that is what they look like. Next slide, please. And this is what they opened in 1889 was Silent Unity. And also the Fillmores also were students of Mary Baker Eddy. Well, actually, yes, Mary Baker Eddy, and then also Emma Curtis Hopkins. So again, their roots began with Christian Science. And in 1890, Emma Curtis Hopkins lectures. 1891, the Fillmores were actually ordained by Hopkins. Next slide, please. And this is actually, I found this picture of Jesus, which I think is pretty funny. Well, funny and beautiful the way it does that. So Unity teaches that the Spirit of God lived in Jesus just as it lives in every person. Every person has the potential to express the perfection of Christ as Jesus did by becoming more Christ-like in everyday life. Next slide, please. And this is a couple of things that Charles wrote. He wrote, all causes are essentially mental, and whosoever comes into daily contact with a high order of thinking must take on some of it. Next slide, please. And so their belief system, I'll just read these three. God is the source and creator of all. There is no other enduring power. God is good and present everywhere. We are spiritual beings created in God's image. The Spirit of God lives within each person. Therefore, all people are inherently good. We create our life experience through our way of thinking. There is power in affirmative prayer, which we believe increases our connection of God. So as we can see in all of these individuals who studied from the beginning with Emma and with Mary Baker Eddy and probably read some of Quimby, these individuals were the one that were really laying the groundwork for God is the source and creator of all. Thoughts create. Thoughts are things. We are spiritual beings. We create our life experiences through our way of thinking. And Unity is still very big today, and their Unity magazine and their prayer ministry is thriving. So next slide. And this one, actually, because I know we have a guest in the house this evening, Reverend James Mellon. And when I took my first CPR, one of the things that stood out for me was, I fairly sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm and spring forth with a mighty faith to do the things that ought to be done by me. And also, I do know about Reverend James that he also was able to go to some of, forgetting his name right now, of Eric Butterworth's classes. And so I pulled out Eric Butterworth, and Eric Butterworth said, because he was a big Christian, Unity minister in New York. And he wrote several books spiritual economics, and he just was a big pioneer also and man of thought on the field. And he said, the innermost essence of my being is fearless. It is immune to criticism. It does not fear any challenge. And basically, all of what the groundwork that these individuals were laying was, yes, that the strength and the power and the allness of God is the truth of each one of us. And that through any challenge, stepping into what is the real truth, even with Body Temple, it's about the healing is already the truth. It's aligning in that truth. Next slide, please. And we step into our man, Ernest Holmes. I found that picture and I thought, oh, beautiful. Just for me, it just felt like that real sweet, loving quality of him. Next slide, please. And so again, he was influenced by several individuals. He was extremely well read. And so I pulled up a Buddha quote and a quote by him. Buddha said, do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. And actually, with all of his readings, especially with Troward, which I'll get into in a second, with Troward and Buddha and Sri Aurobindo and Quimby and Mary Baker Eddy, and this man absolutely was extremely well read. Although I will say one of the things I found out about Charles Fillmore was he really knew a lot about Hinduism and also was well read in that field. Next, and then Holmes says, borrowing knowledge of reality from all sources, taking the best from every study, science of mind brings together the highest enlightenment of the ages. And that's what I just said a second ago without looking at it. So hooray for me. So that Socrates said, an unexamined life is not worth living. And somewhere I trust that that's what Holmes read, and a lot of these individuals read, and they went, yes, and they answered the call. And so next slide, please. And also, I just wanted to pull up a lot of what the wisdom that he has brought forth to us. Life is a mirror and will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks into it. Yes? Prayer is a thought, a belief, a feeling arising within the mind of the one praying. Next slide, please. And so, in the book Holmes' Essays, in the first chapter, I was struck by, this is what he said to George. He said, I have talked or written about only three things. There is one God, common to all, in and through all things. There is a universe that responds with mechanical regularity to the spontaneity of our thoughts. And the 11th commandment of theology, thou shalt love one another as I have loved you. So bottom line, love and law. And I can see throughout this teaching the weaving from the beginning of Plato and Socrates and Buddha and all of the individuals who knew this truth and spoke it in their language, that Holmes and the Fillmores and Emma and all individuals made it their own yes. And the common thread is mind and love, really. Next slide, please. And so, of course, as we know, one of the keystones is, it is done unto you as you believe. And so I brought a couple of the sayings here of Jesus. For we walk in faith, not by sight. And a new commandment I will give you. Love one another as I have loved you. As so you must love one another. Next slide, please. And the other day in the Signs of Mind magazine, it was on Wednesday, in fact, the title was Be Open. And I had found this, and because I love it, because I know that answer the call, knock at the door, answer it. What is each one of us being called forth to do on a higher level now? Are we not answering the door? So this quote, it was knock at the door and she'll be opened for Wednesday. And then right underneath it, it was, let us waste no further time looking for the secret of success or the key to happiness. Already the door is open, and whosoever will may enter. So again, it's completely up to each one of us. Are you jumping and saying yes? Or is that part of fear that, for instance, is I am open to learn and discover and to let go of? Because I know that in truth, God as me is doing the work, and that as God, I do all things. Next slide, please. And so also, as we know, that Emerson was a huge influence also on Ernest Holmes. And write it on, and this also with our guest in the house, in CPR when I did it for the first time, this stuck with me, and I chose this for our Reverend James. Write it on your heart that every day is the best day in the year. And he also said, all life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better. And that's really a lot of what our teaching is. Experiment. Do more of what works. Find what works. Do less of what doesn't. And then do it over again. You're experimenting. It's a science. That's the beauty. This is a philosophy, a science, and a truth. And this is what all of these individuals that were paving the way for all of us were discovering through self-examination. Next slide, please. And I found Sri Aurobindo because I know also that Ernest Holmes read Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo says, witness and stand back from nature. That is the first step to the soul's freedom. And so that's also in line with what Emerson did. Emerson was go to nature. Just be open and present and let yourself discover the beauty and the wildness that you are. And he also said, to rotate on its own axis is not the one movement for the human soul. There is also its wheeling around the sun of an inexhaustible illumination. We are the light and the love and the power and the essence of God. Next slide, please. And so here we come to the biggest influence, Thomas Troward, who said, and I love this, creative power that is receptive. Creative power that is receptive, attitude of expectancy, which makes a mold into which the plastic and as yet undifferentiated substance can flow and take the desired form. Again, creative power. Mold the plastic. Subjective mind. Think. Subjective mind says, ooh, okay, you're thinking that, let's go. And then comes forth the form. Spirit, soul, body. Next. And so again, because I know we all love Troward, and we've been studying him so much as I'm wheeling around here, it is an enduring truth which can never be altered, that every infraction of the law of nature must carry its punitive consequences with it. We can never get beyond that range of cause and effect. And that's the beauty. Cause and what you do, you're never going to be able to say, oh no, I didn't do that. And there's only a couple slides left. Let me take a breath. We can gradually grow into any condition we desire, provided we first make ourselves in habitual mental attitude the person who corresponds to those conditions. So what is this actually? Class?
Correspondence.
And?
Cause and effect.
Thank you. Mental equivalent, yes. So mental equivalent. Love it. Next slide, please. And so in closing, the bottom line to all of this is know thyself. Open up and discover the self-knowledge, the wisdom that began with the ancients who set the tone of opening up to the soul's work, to absolutely recognizing that we're here to live, move, and have our being as God. And I found this and I just love it because this is the peace, the wealth, thoughts become things. That is what has been the thread that is binding us all together. That started back when Quimby realized that, mind has something to do with all of it. And then Mary took it on her way, and then so did Emma Curtis Hopkins. So did the Brooks sisters. There was another sister that was with Nona Kramer, the Divine Science, Unity. And it was all the self-discovery. It was all the willingness to grow and unfold and walk in truth. And so the next slide, please. And so as I started out with the ancients, this is just an ancient prayer that I would like us just to take a moment and just be present with as I read this in love and in gratitude for all of you being so present, and also to say that in these next 8 weeks, we will be diving deeper into the philosophy of these individuals and how they lived it. So I really thank you for this intro evening. And so I honor the place in you in which the entire universe dwells. I honor the place in you which is of love, of truth, of light, and of peace. When you are in that place in you, and I am in that place in me, we are one. And so it is.
I'm going to go backwards this time. Karen Mitchell, you can go first.
Thank you. Wow, Mariana, just wow. I mean, I don't know what to say. I learned so much. I knew a lot of it already, but you made it interesting. I loved the flow of it. I loved your slides. I didn't feel like you were rushing through it. Yes, great. Loved it. Great job.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. You were brilliant, Mariana. Just amazing presentation. I love the flow of it. I love what I learned. I have questions about us in religious science, going back to the Christ consciousness, because I think there's so much more than just the Christ consciousness. I mean, it just brought up so much for me that I would question, that I would look at, and that thread of truth, of absolute truth around the power of cause to, it creates the effects in our life, I think is so much more than what's gleaned from just the Christ consciousness. So even though that has been a big part of the teachings, and I just think the way you put everything together was brilliant, except that I had to tell you I was thrown off at the beginning when you said, this is the beginning of an 8-week class. I'm like, oh no, what? We're doing 8 weeks? And I was like, oh, because it just, that was a class. That everything you did was a class in and of itself, full and complete, and really honor yourself for that.
Yeah. And thank you. That's what I realized. That's why I said that in the beginning, because this is a 7-weekend class. Thank you. All right.
Personally, like I would have just preferred different content because so much of it we do know, and we spent the last 2 years on a lot of it. I would have loved to focus on things like Plato and Socrates and Swedenborg and people who we don't really know about. You know, Emma Curtis Hopkins. I've never taken an Emma Curtis Hopkins class. And at Fox, I still have no idea who he is, but we have a lot of his books on the shelf. So I would have really liked to have, as a New Thought minister, had more information about things that we never touch upon, that is something that places that other churches talk about. I imagine Emma Curtis Hopkins comes up, but I've never, do you know what I mean? Like, I would have liked more of that basis. And you talked about Ernest Holmes saying that what Science of Mind is the best of all of the ancient wisdom, but I would have liked to have known what the best things of those ancient wisdom was, to have a basis of what the Science of Mind is.
Right, but I was to do the history of New Thought. That's why in 7-week teaching, I would break it down.
You're teaching a religion, so that's what I was thinking.
Oh, no, I'm not defending. I'm just, yeah, I am. Yeah.
Thank you. Congratulations. That was by far, in my opinion, the best presentation I've seen you do. You were prepared, you were poised, you had obviously knew what your subject matter was. It was very interesting. It was entertaining. You were inspired and you were inspiring. If I was to criticize, I can't disagree with my beautiful fellow student over here. And like Helen, I was kind of first cut off, but then I got, okay, she's presenting this as an introductory course. Got it. Okay, now I know where we're going with this. So you followed through with that, and that was cool. If I was to make any criticism whatsoever, and it's very light criticism, you could have probably made the slides with the words and lines a little more interesting. But it's not a big, you followed it, so it wasn't hard to follow. But that's about the only criticism. Congratulations, really well done.
Sharon.
I really appreciate your enthusiasm, and you made it interesting because you were so interested in it. And I thought you used the slides well, and for the most part, they were readable, and there wasn't too much information on most of them. I think you did a good job. It was well organized, and the flow was nice. Yeah, it was a good job.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, I know how much work you put into it, so
Yeah.
I thought you did a beautiful, beautiful job getting through all of that, and you did it without any notes. You knew your stuff. My only constructive feedback to you would be, don't look at the slides so much. I saw a lot of the back of your head. But everything you did was just, I was in awe at how much you just spoke about everything you talked about. So.
Thank you.
Like David said, it was the best I've ever seen you, and you did an amazing job. I was a little hard to follow you walking around and moving around. There was too much movement for me. But other than that, it was absolutely gorgeous.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. I agree. I thought you did a really beautiful job. Why did you start it with the 8-week thing when that wasn't the assignment?
Well, just as Karen Mitchell did she stepped out of the box and did an interview.
She stepped out of the box and did a different format. Why did you do the thing about the 8 weeks?
Because it was a different format for me. I was pretending that I was stepping into a real teaching situation, that this was going to be a real class that I was going to be teaching. So that was my premise.
But your directive was to just give us an hour of the history of New Thought.
Right, and in my thought, I just thought I would make it interesting and turn, just say as if I was teaching a class.
Well, here's what happened at the beginning of it, you were pretending. You were acting. And your whole persona, you changed in about 5 minutes. You got into it. But at the beginning, you came in and you acted. You did that fake thing that drives me nuts. You walked in, hello class, I am here. And it was this big fake thing. So you were pretending. Never do that. People get it. I mean, you won't lose us because we have to sit here. And you did a great job. But in the first 5-10 minutes, I was really worried. Then you fixed it. But no, I'm serious. This is a big issue of yours because if you do that, you lose most of the class because you're not authentic. You're not real. It's just too fake. Do you know what I'm talking about? When you started the class?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. For me, and I'm going to go to what Ellen said. Most of the time, you didn't add anything to the quotes. You just read them and moved on. That's unacceptable. If you put a quote up there, it's because you have something interesting to say about it. I can read a book. So you did a lot of that. Okay? So be very careful to do that. And then, interestingly enough, again what Ellen said, it is amazing that you were able to talk without notes. But you actually, what you talked about were up there in these real, what David said, in these really dense slides with all of these things that you actually said without the slide. You didn't need the slide. It's just a crutch. You don't need those slides. Don't put all those things up there and then, because at one point you said everything and then you turn around and said, oh, I already said all this. You don't need to do that. Okay? That's a good thing. You don't need this. You don't need the crutches you're giving yourself up there. Yeah, so just so many quotes you kept reading Emerson. You read this great Emerson quote and then didn't say anything about it. Okay? What you really were very good at was answering the questions off the cuff, which made it very clear to us you knew what you were doing. You know, which was very different than yours, Terry, because when we asked you the questions, you didn't have the answers. Now I don't have any confidence about that teacher. You had great confidence and I knew you knew your stuff. You read a quote about the oversoul and then never mentioned the oversoul, what it was, since it's the entire crux of Emerson's teaching. You went right by it. Because all you did was read the quote and moved on. Next slide. You can't do that. You've got to, if you're going to put a quote up there, you're going to put a slide up there, you better be telling me something interesting about it. Okay? Too much reading. That's really my only big thing. Right. Maybe it was just too dense. A lot of the quotes were really dense. And then, however, here's what's an interesting thing. You read a very dense Quimby quote that probably no one in the room really understood what it meant when you first read it. And then when I asked you what it meant, you didn't know what it meant, and then you articulated it beautifully. That's what you should have been doing the entire class. Because when I pressed you on it, when I made you tell me what it meant, you articulated it beautifully, and then I made you read it again. And then when she read it again, didn't that quote make sense? That's how you teach. But I had to press you into that. You just read the quote and moved on, and none of us knew what it was. I'm not saying that none of you knew what it meant. Okay? Same thing, never read a quote and just move on. Your chronology was off on Mary Vicaretti, so be careful. Not off, but you didn't do it chronologically. You had 1889 and 1885, and it wasn't in order.
Oh, that was divine signs, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Mary Vicaretti. Christian Science. And then I just want to know, the closing, you did a great closing. I really, really thought you closed this beautifully. There was a moment where you said, I need to take a breath, and you made me nervous. What was that about?
Because I wanted to honor the time, and I felt my internal rushing and getting nervous, and so I wanted.
In front of a classroom, don't do that.
Okay.
Do it on your own.
Okay.
Just take the damn breath.
All right.
Don't tell us, I need to take a breath because I'm falling apart.
No,
but that's kind of what you told us. I need to take a breath here because something's out for me.
No, I didn't say any of that. I don't believe. Did I say anything?
I need to take a breath. Yeah, you did.
I need to take a breath. Yes. Okay.
I need to take a breath.
Well, because I've been talking for an hour also, and I realized.
Okay.
Oh, so you can't do that.
You know not to do that.
Okay.
Okay. So my big notes to you, first of all, I think you did a great job. I really did. I agree with Karen. I agree with Karen. the history of New Thought, you did it beautifully. But it is interesting to bring in some of the renegades along the way, some of them. Because I thought you spent an awful lot of time with Anton Mesmer, who did not deserve all that time. He really did. And you got that a little backwards too. Because to be honest, Anton Mesmer, there was a reason why mesmerism was the precursor to hypnotism. He didn't start the animal magnetism until later. He kind of abandoned mesmerism for animal magnetism, but most people debunked that. But back to what he taught originally, you said that he wasn't really the guy who brought up hypnotism. It was somebody later. It wasn't. It was Anton Mesmer. He then went to animal magnetism. He went a little crazy at the end of his life.
Well, I read 3 books on it, and so that's why I spent so much time reading, because that wasn't the clarity that I got out of those books. And because Ellen was, Tess, I had books all over the floor.
Sure you did.
And the thing about Mesmer was I kept on going, what? To me, it was confusing.
Clearly.
So
that came out a little bit, that it was confusing.
But I did find I did find what animal magnetism was, and
Yes,
I did.
Even need to go into it because it was so debunked. Why would you go into that with us? Except, but briefly. So I'm just saying, you did a great job.
Yeah.
You really did.
Yeah.
But you're still falling into some of your traps. The fake thing, the playing a part thing, and acting and playing. My feeling was that you decided that. Here's what I got. My thought was that you used that first moment as a crutch to say, I'm only going to do an overview because I'm going to teach an 8-week class. To me, psychologically, it was more about, at first I was like, oh, she's not going to really do the assignment because it seems so big. It's like what I said before.
Surprise.
Don't tell me it's going to take 8 whole weeks to get the, it was another way of saying, there's way too much here for me to do, but this is what I'm going to do. That's how it felt. That's how it started. When you started, I was like, oh, there's that excuse. So, and yet, I want to be honest, and yet, I thought you did a great job. As I would have said, it was your best to date, except for the beginning and the fact that you read a lot. It shows the back of your head a lot. But don't, just as you go forward, when you plan these presentations and classes, there is absolutely, if you put a quote up there and you don't have an insightful, something new to tell me about it, don't put it up there. Is that good? That's a good rule to live by.
Okay.
For all of us to be others. Okay? Good job. Really good job.
Thank you. Yes, I didn't write up the book. I used 18 books to do all this.
Good.
And
Good.
So
Good.
absolutely. Thank you.
Mariana,
Yes?
can you send it to us, your presentation?
Sure. I can send it to you.
I think everybody's going to get every PowerPoint. Right? We have them all. We have every PowerPoint, so everybody should get everyone.
We have every PowerPoint except the ones that were done on the.
Oh, except for the ones that David.
Word.
Okay, guys. David, why don't you introduce that? Just put it right there. Yes.
Are you gonna give us any overview of what's gonna be covered on this test?
No.
Is it gonna be next week?
Yes. The test is going to be next week. Just come in with an open mind and answer the questions. The test is going to be about an hour and a half, probably, and the other hour and a half is going to be going over the test. Okay?
So are you going to
I'll send
email? Yeah, you'll send it to
I'll
me.
email you the test right at 7 o'clock. Howard?
Okay. Yes.
So Connie will send it to you right when we start class, and you can take the same exact amount of time.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I will trust you to grade your own test.
Well, couldn't I send it back to somebody else and they send me theirs?
No.
Okay.
You'd have to scan someone's in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Unless,
It could be done, but why?
if anybody brings their computer, I'd be happy to let you take it on your computer. Would you like to take them on your computer?
Yes. I love that.
I bet you all would. Then we can send it to you. Yes, Alan.
Okay.
No reason.
Yes, everybody should do it on their computer because actually.
I can't.
Why not?
because I'm not well read on the computer yet. And,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I did that PowerPoint, which was awesome, but.
All right, let's go.
So I know everybody's anxious to stay here for another half hour, or we can even go into more of a discussion about the presentations we did tonight. But I'm going to invite everybody instead of that to focus in now and to allow yourselves to be as centered, as comfortable as you possibly can at this moment, because we did some really good work tonight. Collectively, because there's only one mind. The work here was just absolutely beautiful. The work here was educational. We all learned today. Because that's what this is all about, recognizing that what we're learning is part of that one mind, part of that one power, part of that one knowing, that love that we are, because this is all about that love. And I know that Terry and Mariana are that love and presented it with love. The criticisms that Reverend James gave to Mariana and to Terry and to all of us whenever we've done our work comes from that very same love. The love of what we're learning, the love of what we're teaching, the love of who we're becoming, and the love of who we are. And each one of us listened with that same power, that same energy, because we are that energy. We share that energy. We recognize that energy as oneness. That's exactly what this is all about. Every time I come in here, it becomes that for me ever, ever more deeply, ever more greatly. And I know that as we move forward and as we anticipate with such glee and joy this upcoming test next Thursday, that love, that knowing, that sharing, that collective knowledge that we are, that one mind that we are is going to bring us all through it. It's going to be absolutely perfect. Because that's what we are, that one perfection. And with that knowing, I'm so grateful for this evening. I'm so grateful for this class. I'm so grateful for the hard work, the wonderful work, the beautiful work that my fellow students, my fellow selves presented to me this evening. So I'm filled with that gratitude. I'm filled with that appreciation. I'm filled with blessing Ellen as she sneezes through my treatment and loving her for that. And knowing that you'll all be wonderfully warm and safe in your little beds tonight, thinking about what we did this evening. And with that in mind, together we say,
yes. And so it is. Thank you, David. My bed's big, not little.
My bed's big, but the part I sleep in is small.
Good night, Ellen. Good night.
Good night, Ellen. Good night, Karen.
Good night. Thank you.
Connie, can you ask David about the 29th, hon?
The 29th?
Oh, yes. I just remembered why you wanted me to ask that, but yes, I will.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd also like to schedule these classes for the summer, just on a Wednesday night.